Imagine standing before massive T-shaped pillars carved with intricate depictions of animals arranged in perfect circles across a hillside in southeastern Turkey. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. The scale is monumental. Now imagine this was built 11,600 years ago, before pottery, before metal tools, before the wheel, before agriculture itself. This is Göbekli Tepe, and it shouldn't exist. The conventional timeline of human civilization places the development of complex society firmly after the agricultural revolution. First came farming, then permanent settlements, then organized religion, then monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe reverses that entire sequence. Here we find sophisticated megalithic construction created by people who were supposedly wandering hunter-gatherers. The implications are staggering. The site remained hidden beneath an artificial-looking mound until 1994, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt arrived to survey what local farmers had long known as a rocky hilltop littered with broken stones. Schmidt recognized immediately that the limestone fragments weren't natural. Within weeks of excavation, his team uncovered the first of what would become one of archaeology's most significant discoveries. The site predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It predates the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years. It predates pottery. Göbekli Tepe consists of massive circular and oval structures, each containing enormous T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in rings. The largest pillars stand 5.5 meters tall and weigh approximately 20 tons, comparable to the weight of 3 adult African elephants. These weren't simple standing stones. Each pillar was carved with remarkable precision from bedrock quarries located nearby, then transported to the site and erected vertically. The surfaces bear intricate relief carvings of animals. Snakes coil around pillar bases. Scorpions crawl across stone faces. Foxes and wild boars prowl in procession. Vultures spread their wings across the limestone. The T-shaped design itself suggests anthropomorphic representation. These aren't abstract pillars, but stylized human forms. Arms carved in relief extend along the narrow sides. Hands are positioned at what would be the waist. Some pillars bear carved belts, loincloths, or foxskin garments. They stand like silent sentries arranged in circles, facing inward toward a center, suggesting ceremonial gatherings of considerable sophistication. The site covers approximately 22 acres, yet only about 5% has been excavated. Geomagnetic surveys indicate at least 20 additional circular structures remain buried beneath the surface. What has been uncovered already rewrites our understanding of Neolithic capabilities. Layer D, the oldest and deepest excavated section, contains the most sophisticated structures, a reversal of expected architectural evolution. Typically, construction techniques improve over time. At Göbekli Tepe, the earliest buildings represent the pinnacle of craftsmanship. How did hunter-gatherer societies accomplish this? The logistics alone present formidable challenges. Quarrying 20-ton limestone pillars requires coordinated labor, specialized knowledge, and considerable time. Moving them from quarry to construction site demands engineering solutions. Carving intricate animal reliefs into hard limestone surfaces requires skill developed over years, possibly generations. Erecting these massive stones vertically and arranging them in precise circles requires architectural planning. All of this supposedly occurred before these people had domesticated animals for transport, before they had metal tools for carving, before they had permanent settlements to house the workforce. The conventional explanation suggests that Göbekli Tepe represents a ceremonial center where scattered hunter-gatherer groups periodically gathered for religious rituals. The absence of habitation debris, no cooking hearths, no residential structures, no evidence of daily life, supported this interpretation. The site appears to have been purely ceremonial, a sacred space constructed for purposes we can only speculate about. Some researchers propose that the very act of building Göbekli Tepe may have catalyzed the agricultural revolution. Perhaps the need to feed large workforces gathering for construction projects drove the development of farming. Perhaps religion came before agriculture, not after. Yet mysteries compound. Around 8000 BCE, after centuries of use, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Someone went to extraordinary effort to fill in the circular structures with debris and soil, covering the pillars, preserving the site beneath an artificial mound. This wasn't abandonment. This was careful, intentional concealment. The pillars weren't toppled or destroyed. They were gently covered, almost protectively, as if being saved for a future generation. Why would a people invest decades, perhaps centuries, in constructing this massive complex, only to deliberately hide it? The burial preserved the structures remarkably well. The carvings remain crisp after 10,000 years underground. But what motivated such unusual behavior? Were they preserving something sacred from approaching threats? Were they sealing off a site that had served its purpose? Were they hiding evidence of capabilities they feared others might misuse? Klaus Schmidt, who devoted his career to excavating Göbekli Tepe until his death in 2014, believed the site represented humanity's first temple. He argued that religious impulse, not economic need, drove early civilizational development. Göbekli Tepe, in his interpretation, wasn't built by a civilization. It built civilization. The need to construct and maintain such a center forced hunter-gatherers to develop new organizational structures, agricultural practices, and social hierarchies. Alternative theories suggest even more radical possibilities. If hunter-gatherers built Göbekli Tepe, they possessed knowledge and capabilities far beyond what we credit them with. Some researchers question whether the conventional dating might be incorrect, whether the site might be even older than current estimates suggest. Others wonder whether the builders might have been survivors of an earlier, more advanced culture, preserving knowledge through these stone monuments. The animal symbolism itself presents interpretive challenges. Why these specific creatures? Snakes, scorpions, and vultures aren't random choices. They suggest symbolic significance, possibly astronomical. Some researchers see potential constellation patterns in the animal arrangements. The circles themselves might represent celestial observations, with pillars marking specific stellar positions. If true, this implies sophisticated astronomical knowledge existing 7,000 years before Stonehenge's creators aligned stones with celestial events. Göbekli Tepe stands as testament to human ambition and capability we're only beginning to understand. The site forces uncomfortable questions about prehistoric society. If hunter-gatherers could coordinate the labor, develop the expertise, and sustain the effort required to build this complex, what else were they capable of? What other achievements might lie buried beneath sites we've dismissed as natural hills? How many other Göbekli Tepes remain undiscovered? The deliberate burial remains the deepest mystery. Someone wanted this site preserved but hidden, The act suggests intentionality that transcends simple abandonment. Whatever knowledge, practice, or warning Göbekli Tepe embodied, its builders chose concealment over destruction, preservation over exposure. Perhaps they knew that future generations would eventually uncover what they'd buried. Perhaps they intended exactly that, a time capsule containing evidence of capabilities that conventional history says shouldn't exist. As excavation continues at this sprawling site, each new discovery raises more questions than it answers. The 5% currently uncovered has already revolutionized our understanding of prehistory. What secrets remain in the 95% still buried? And if this is what Neolithic hunter-gatherers achieved in southeastern Turkey, what might we find at other sites around the world? The answer might lie not in Turkey, but across the Mediterranean, where another civilization carved something even more remarkable. Not upward into the sky, but downward into the living rock itself. Descend 35 feet beneath the streets of Paola, Malta, and you enter a world carved entirely from living rock. The Hypogeum of Halsaflieni isn't simply an underground chamber. It's a 3-story architectural complex featuring curved ceilings, carved pillars, decorative elements, and acoustic properties that modern sound engineers struggle to explain. The people who created this labyrinth between 3600 and 2500 BCE understood something profound about sound, space, and the human body's response to specific frequencies. The discovery came by accident in 1902, as discoveries of this magnitude often do. Workers cutting cisterns for a housing development broke through the roof of the uppermost chamber. What they initially dismissed as a natural cave quickly revealed itself as something far more extraordinary. The Malta Archaeological Committee began formal excavation, uncovering layer after layer of chambers carved with increasingly sophisticated detail as they descended deeper into the bedrock. The complex spans approximately 500 square meters across 3 distinct levels. The upper level, closest to the surface, features simple chamber designs carved directly from the limestone. The middle level displays far more elaborate architecture with carved pillar supports, doorway lintels, and the famous oracle room. The lowest level plunges deepest into the rock, containing chambers whose purpose remains uncertain, but whose execution required remarkable precision and planning. Approximately 500 tons of rock were removed to create this underground complex. Think about that figure for a moment. 500 tons of limestone, carved away using copper tools and obsidian blades, the hardest implements available to Neolithic builders. The removed material had to be transported somewhere, up narrow passages, through finished chambers, eventually out to the surface. No trace of this massive debris pile has been found. Where did 500 tons of pulverized limestone go? The carving techniques display sophisticated understanding of stone properties. Walls curve smoothly rather than meeting at harsh angles. Ceilings arch overhead in patterns that distribute weight and prevent collapse. Decorative elements include spiral designs, honeycomb patterns, and architectural features that mimic above-ground temple construction. Columns, lintels, and doorways carved in relief from solid rock. This wasn't crude, hollowing out of caves. This was architectural design executed underground. Yet the most remarkable feature isn't visible at all. The oracle room, located on the middle level, possesses acoustic properties that researchers are only beginning to understand. When sound is produced in this chamber, the space resonates at a frequency of approximately 110 Hz. This isn't random. Multiple studies, including research by Dr. Paolo De Bertolis from the University of Trieste, have documented how 110 Hz affects human brain activity. At this frequency, the prefrontal cortex, the region associated with complex cognitive behavior, decision-making, and social interaction, shows decreased activity. Simultaneously, areas associated with emotion, intuition, and creativity become more active. Stand in the oracle room and speak. Your voice doesn't simply echo. It resonates through the space with a quality that feels almost physical. The sensation is disorienting, meditative, potentially consciousness-altering. Was this intentional? The evidence suggests yes. The chamber's dimensions, its curved ceiling, even the specific type of limestone used, all contribute to this precise, resonant frequency. This wasn't acoustic accident. This was acoustic engineering. How did Neolithic people understand sound physics millennia before modern acoustics developed as a science? How did they know that a 110 Hz specifically would affect human consciousness? How did they test and refine the chamber's dimensions to achieve this exact resonance? The questions multiply faster than answers emerge. The hypogeum served multiple functions throughout its roughly 500 years of active use. The bones of more than 7,000 individuals have been recovered from various chambers, indicating significant mortuary use. But this wasn't simply a tomb. The architectural elaboration, the acoustic engineering, the decorative elements, all suggest ceremonial or ritualistic purposes beyond mere burial. Perhaps the altered states of consciousness induced by the oracle room played a role in death rituals, helping mourners connect with deceased ancestors or easing souls' transitions to the afterlife. Artifacts recovered during excavation provide glimpses into the lives of those who used this underground complex. Pottery fragments, stone tools, decorative beads, and carved figurines suggest a culture with sophisticated artistic sensibilities. The famous Sleeping Lady figurine, a reclining female form discovered in one chamber, has become iconic of Maltese prehistory. Her peaceful posture raises questions about death rituals, dream incubation practices, or healing ceremonies that might have occurred in these resonant underground spaces. The construction timeline itself presents logistical puzzles. Carving 500 square meters of chambers from solid limestone over multiple levels would require decades of sustained effort. How was the project organized? Did a single generation begin and complete the work, or did multiple generations contribute to an evolving vision? The increasing architectural sophistication from upper to lower levels might suggest the latter, skills and ambitions growing as the project progressed. Comparison with other ancient acoustic sites reveals intriguing patterns. Newgrange in Ireland, built roughly contemporaneously with the hypogeum's middle period, also features sophisticated acoustic properties in its central chamber. Certain chambers in Egyptian pyramids exhibit resonant frequencies. The ancient theatre at Epidaurus in Greece, built much later, demonstrates remarkable acoustic engineering. Did these cultures share knowledge of sound manipulation, or did multiple societies independently discover these acoustic principles? The hypogeum's preservation presents ongoing challenges. When first opened to the public in the 20th century, the influx of visitors brought moisture, temperature changes, and carbon dioxide that began deteriorating the ancient limestone surfaces. Green algae bloomed on previously pristine walls. Carved details started eroding. Malta's heritage authorities eventually restricted access dramatically, allowing only small groups on carefully controlled tours. The site that survived 5,000 years underground began degrading within decades of exposure to modern air and human presence. What remains unclear is the hypogeum's role within broader Neolithic Maltese society. The islands contain numerous above-ground megalithic temples from roughly the same period. Massive stone structures like Gantija and Hagar Chim that display similar architectural sophistication. Did the same culture build both underground and above-ground complexes? Did they serve different purposes? Why carve an elaborate temple complex underground when you're simultaneously building megalithic structures on the surface? The acoustic engineering suggests the underground setting was essential, not incidental. Perhaps certain rituals required the isolation, darkness, and resonant properties that only underground chambers could provide. Perhaps the altered consciousness induced by 110 Hertz resonance was central to religious practices in ways we can barely imagine. Modern visitors report feeling dizzy, emotional, sometimes experiencing visual phenomena in the oracle room. If these effects were intentional, the hypogeum becomes something far more complex than a tomb. It becomes a technology for altering perception. The faces carved in relief throughout the complex stare silently from the walls. Some appear serene. Others seem to contort in expressions that might be anguish or ecstasy. Were these representations of ancestors, deities, visitors to the underworld, or were they portraits of living people experiencing the consciousness-altering effects of standing in these resonant chambers, their features captured in stone mid-transformation? 5,000 years separate us from the people who carved the hypogeum. We've developed theories of acoustics, studied brainwave patterns, built technologies the Neolithic mind couldn't conceive. Yet standing in the oracle room, feeling 110 hertz vibrate through chest and skull, one inescapable conclusion emerges. They understood something we're only beginning to rediscover. The hypogeum wasn't primitive religious architecture. It was applied neuroscience, carved in stone. From acoustic engineering beneath Malta's streets to mechanical precision high in the Bolivian Andes, ancient builders demonstrated mastery of physical principles that challenge our assumptions about technological progress. At 12,800 feet above sea level in the Bolivian Andes lies Pumapunku, a complex of stones cut with tolerances that would challenge modern CNC machinery. Perfectly smooth surfaces extend across massive blocks. Right angles measure accurate to fractions of a degree. Interlocking H-blocks feature grooves machined to millimeter precision. The Tiwanaku people who built this site, according to conventional archaeology, possessed only stone hammers and bronze chisels. The mathematics don't work. Pumapunku forms part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, a pre-Columbian archaeological site that flourished between roughly 500 and 1000 CE. The conventional dating places construction firmly within this time frame based on pottery styles and carbon dating of organic materials found at the site. Yet the stonework itself tells a different story, one of capabilities that seem impossibly advanced for the proposed timeline and available technology. The primary construction material is andesite, a volcanic rock rating between 7 and 8 on the Mohs hardness scale. For context, this places andesite harder than steel files and comparable to hardened steel tools. Working andesite with copper or bronze implements, the hardest metals available to pre-Columbian Andean cultures, would be like trying to carve granite with a butter knife. Copper rates 3 on the Mohs scale. Bronze reaches perhaps 4. These materials are definitionally softer than the stone they supposedly shaped. Some blocks at Pumapunku are carved from diorite, rating even harder at 7 to 8.5 on the Mohs scale. Diorite requires diamond-tipped tools to cut effectively in modern stonework. The ancient builders carved intricate grooves, precise angles, and decorative elements into this extraordinarily hard material with what archaeologists insist were primitive bronze chisels. The famous H-blocks present perhaps the most compelling evidence of advanced techniques. These massive stones, weighing between 130 and 180 tons, feature complex interlocking designs carved with extraordinary precision. The blocks contain internal channels and grooves that fit together like three-dimensional puzzles. The joints are so precise that researchers have measured tolerances of less than 1 millimeter across surfaces spanning several meters. Modern stonemasons using laser-guided diamond saws struggle to achieve comparable accuracy. These H-blocks were quarried approximately 10 kilometers from the construction site, transporting stones weighing over 130 tons across rugged Andean terrain presents formidable engineering challenges even with modern equipment. The Tiwanaku culture had no wheeled vehicles. Wheels weren't used in pre-Columbian Americas. They had no draft animals capable of moving such weight. Llamas and alpacas, the largest domesticated animals in the region, can carry perhaps 50 kilograms. Moving a 130-ton block would require 2,600 llamas, all pulling in perfect coordination across mountainous terrain. Log rollers offer one theoretical solution, but the Altiplano's harsh environment supports minimal tree growth. The massive quantities of timber required for rollers would need to be transported from lower elevations, adding another logistical impossibility to an already implausible scenario. Some researchers propose that blocks were moved during wet seasons when ground became muddy and slippery, reducing friction. This explanation still requires imagining the coordination of enormous human labor forces moving multi-ton stones across 10 kilometers of challenging landscape. The stone surfaces themselves raise additional questions. Many blocks display perfectly flat planes extending across their entire surface area. Achieving this requires either enormous amounts of time spent grinding and polishing, or mechanical assistance that ensures uniform pressure across the work surface. Some surfaces are so smooth they appear polished to a near-reflective finish. Running your hand across these stones feels like touching machined metal, not ancient carved rock. Certain blocks contain precisely drilled holes, perfectly circular and parallel, extending several inches into the hard stone. The drill marks show none of the wobbling or imprecision expected from hand-operated tools. Some holes appear to have been drilled from both sides of the block, meeting in the middle with near-perfect alignment. This suggests either remarkably sophisticated measuring techniques or multiple workers coordinating their drilling to extraordinary precision. Engineer and author Christopher Dunn has extensively analyzed the precision stonework at various ancient sites, including Pumapunku. His background in aerospace manufacturing gives him unique perspective on machining tolerances and surface finishing. Dunn argues that many features at Pumapunku display characteristics consistent with machine tooling. uniform depths in carved channels, perfectly perpendicular corners, surfaces finished to tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. He's not claiming aliens built the site. He's observing that the stonework exhibits qualities we associate with mechanical precision, not hand tools. Arthur Posnansky, a Bolivian scholar who spent decades studying Tiwanaku and Pumapunku in the early 20th century, proposed a controversial theory based on astronomical alignments. He argued that certain architectural features aligned with celestial positions that would only occur if the site were built much earlier, potentially 15,000 or more years ago. Mainstream archaeology has largely rejected Posnansky's archaeoastronomical dating, but his observations about the precision and sophistication of Pumapunku's stonework remain valid regardless of dating disputes. The site's current state adds another layer of mystery. Pumapunku appears to have been deliberately destroyed or dismantled at some point in its history. Massive stones lie scattered across the complex as if violently displaced. Some blocks show evidence of attempted cutting or breaking. The Spanish conquistadors recorded finding the site already in ruins when they arrived in the 16th century. Local legends speak of the site being destroyed in a single night by some cataclysmic event, though geological evidence doesn't clearly support sudden catastrophe. What we see today represents perhaps a fraction of Pumapunku's original scope. Many stones have been removed over centuries for use in other construction projects. The Catholic Church in nearby Tiwanaku village incorporates blocks clearly quarried from the ancient site. Colonial-era construction throughout the region repurposed Pumapunku's precisely cut stones. We're examining the picked-over remains of what was once a far more extensive complex. The question of purpose haunts Pumapunku as much as questions of technique. What function demanded such precision? Religious structures don't require machine tolerances. Residential buildings don't need blocks fitted to millimeter accuracy. The level of exactitude suggests function beyond mere aesthetics or conventional architecture. Some researchers speculate about astronomical observation platforms, others about structures designed to demonstrate technological capability, still others about purposes we can't imagine because we lack the cultural context. Pumapunku's elevation adds another consideration. At nearly 13,000 feet above sea level, the thin atmosphere makes physical labor significantly more challenging. Workers would tire faster, think less clearly, require more frequent rest. Yet they allegedly accomplished precision stonework, requiring extraordinary focus and stamina in this oxygen-depleted environment. Modern visitors to the site often experience altitude sickness. Ancient workers would have faced the same physiological challenges while supposedly hand-carving diorite with bronze tools. The conventional narrative asks us to believe that Tiwanaku culture, using Bronze Age technology, quarried stones weighing over 100 tons from bedrock, transported them 10 kilometers across rugged terrain without wheels or suitable draft animals, then carved them with precision matching modern machining tolerances, all at an altitude where oxygen deprivation impairs physical and cognitive function. Each element seems barely plausible. Combined, they strain credibility past the breaking point. Alternative explanations multiply in Pumapunku's shadow. Some researchers argue the dating is simply wrong, that the site is far older than conventional archaeology admits, built by an unknown culture with more advanced capabilities than Bronze Age Tiwanaku. Others suggest we fundamentally misunderstood ancient technological capabilities. The techniques existed which have been lost to time. A few propose more exotic scenarios involving lost civilizations or even extraterrestrial influence, though such theories lack supporting evidence beyond the stonework's admittedly remarkable precision. The truth likely lies somewhere between mainstream dismissal and alternative speculation. Pumapunku's builders possessed capabilities we haven't fully recognized or understood, whether those capabilities involved lost techniques, earlier timelines, or simply more sophisticated Bronze Age technology than we credit them with, remains an open question. What's undeniable is the stonework itself. Stones too hard for the supposed tools, precision too exact for the available technology, and transport logistics too challenging for the known methods. Pumapunku presents an impossible equation: stone hardness requiring diamond-edged tools, precision demanding mechanical assistance, transportation needing technology that officially didn't exist. Something fundamental doesn't add up. Either our dating is wrong, our understanding of ancient capabilities is incomplete, or there's a chapter of human technological history we've completely missed. The stones offer no answers, only their silent, precise surfaces reflecting questions back at those who examine them. The precision stonework of Pumapunku finds an unlikely parallel thousands of miles away, submerged beneath Pacific waters, where massive formations challenge our understanding of both human capability and geological timescales. 25 meters beneath the Pacific Ocean off Yonaguni Island, Japan's westernmost point, lies a structure that forces an uncomfortable binary choice. Either it's the oldest man-made megalithic construction on Earth, predating the Egyptian pyramids by 8 millennia, or it's the most geometrically perfect example of natural erosion ever discovered. Both explanations seem equally improbable. Kihachiro Aratake, a local dive tour operator, discovered the formation in 1986 while searching for new locations to observe hammerhead sharks. What he found instead was a massive step structure rising from the seabed, featuring apparent terraces, right-angled corners, and what resembled carved pathways. Word spread quickly through Japan's diving community, then to academic circles, igniting a controversy that remains unresolved nearly 4 decades later. The main structure measures approximately 150 meters in length, 40 meters in width, and rises 27 meters from the ocean floor. The formation features multiple levels or terraces arranged in a stepped pyramid configuration. Flat surfaces span considerable distances. Corners meet at precise right angles. What appear to be stairs ascend from one level to another. Additional features include stone pillars, a formation dubbed the Stadium for its amphitheater-like appearance, and channels that resemble roads or pathways connecting different sections. Dr. Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus, has spent decades studying and documenting the Yonaguni Formation. His position is unequivocal. The structure shows clear evidence of human modification. Kimura points to specific features that he argues cannot be explained by natural geological processes alone. Tool marks on stone surfaces, apparent post holes, carvings that resemble animals and geometric patterns, the precise positioning of certain features in relation to astronomical events, the overall architectural coherence suggesting deliberate design rather than random erosion. Kimura's documentation is extensive. He's created detailed topographical maps of the entire structure. He's identified what he believes are specific architectural elements: a main gate, a castle, roads connecting different sections, a triangular depression that could be a ceremonial pool. His research team has catalogued numerous features that display apparent regularity and repetition, the kind of patterns associated with intentional construction rather than natural formation. The geological counter-argument focuses on the properties of sandstone and mudstone, the primary materials composing the Yonaguni Formation. These sedimentary rocks naturally fracture along parallel planes due to their layered structure. Tectonic activity in this seismically active region could create the stepped appearance. Wave action and underwater currents could polish surfaces smooth. The right angles might result from perpendicular fracture patterns common in certain sandstone formations. Geologists point to Devil's Tower in Wyoming or the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland as examples of natural formations exhibiting geometric regularity that can appear artificial. The timing adds crucial context. Approximately 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, during the last ice age, global sea levels stood roughly 40 meters lower than today. The Yonaguni Formation would have been above water, exposed to air and accessible to any population living in the region. If the structure is man-made, it was built before rising seas submerged it, which would make it older than any accepted megalithic construction anywhere on Earth. This timeline presents its own challenges. What civilization existed in this region 12,000 years ago with the capability to construct monumental architecture? The Jomon culture, Japan's earliest known society, doesn't appear in the archaeological record until around 14,000 BCE, and their earliest structures were simple pit dwellings, not megalithic platforms. Evidence of sophisticated stone construction doesn't appear in the Japanese islands until much later. If humans built Yonaguni 12,000 years ago, they've left no other archaeological trace in the region. Yet the formation's features continue to perplex even skeptical observers. The stadium section displays curved terraces arranged in semicircular tiers, resembling an amphitheater. Natural erosion rarely produces such consistent curved patterns. The apparent steps ascending various sections show remarkable uniformity in rise and tread, qualities you'd expect from intentional construction. Certain stones appear to have been removed from their natural position and repositioned, though proving this conclusively underwater remains difficult. Dr. Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University who has examined the formation, takes a middle position. He acknowledges that while the structure is primarily natural, it may show evidence of human modification. Ancient peoples could have discovered this naturally formed terraced platform and enhanced it, carving additional features, smoothing surfaces, or adding architectural elements to a foundation that nature provided. This interpretation allows for both geological formation and human intervention without requiring either pure natural creation or complete artificial construction. The debate extends beyond Yonaguni itself. Additional underwater formations have been reported in the region, including what some researchers claim are roads, walls, and other structures. If these are all natural formations, the Ryukyu Islands represent an unusual concentration of geometrically regular geological features. If they're man-made, they suggest a coastal civilization that thrived before the end of the last ice age, a civilization that has left no other definitive archaeological evidence. Local Okinawan legends speak of ancient kingdoms and sunken cities, though oral traditions are difficult to date precisely. Some researchers see these legends as cultural memory of pre-flooding civilizations. Others view them as common mythological motifs found in coastal cultures worldwide, created to explain submerged formations whose origins were already forgotten. The formation's preservation presents a paradox. If it's natural, why hasn't it eroded more extensively? The structure appears remarkably intact, with sharp corners and flat surfaces that seem at odds with 10,000 years of underwater wave action. If it's man-made, how has it survived so well? Stone structures submerged for millennia typically show significant degradation, biological colonization, and sediment accumulation. Yonaguni displays some of these effects, but remains remarkably clear and defined. Tourism has complicated research efforts. The site attracts thousands of divers annually, all eager to swim through the mysterious terraces and photograph the enigmatic features. This human traffic potentially damages surfaces, disturbs sediments that might contain artifacts, and makes careful archaeological investigation more challenging. The Japanese government has yet to designate the site as protected archaeological heritage, tacitly acknowledging the unresolved debate about its origins. Advanced surveying techniques, including 3D sonar mapping and photogrammetry, have produced detailed models of the entire structure. These models allow researchers to analyze features from multiple angles, measure dimensions precisely, and compare the formation to both natural geological structures and known human constructions. The data supports both interpretations depending on which features you emphasize and which you dismiss as coincidental. The scientific method requires extraordinary evidence for extraordinary claims. A 12,000-year-old megalithic construction would be an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence. What constitutes that evidence remains contentious. For Kimura and those who support human origin, the accumulated architectural features provide that evidence. For skeptical geologists, nothing at Yonaguni definitively excludes natural formation. And without artifacts, tools, or clear human modification, the simplest explanation remains geological. Yonaguni forces that uncomfortable binary choice. Accept that advanced stone construction occurred in the Ryukyu Islands before the dawn of recorded history, built by a culture that otherwise left no trace, subsequently submerged by rising seas. Or accept that underwater tectonic activity, erosion patterns, and sandstone fracturing conspired to create a formation that mimics architectural design with almost mocking precision. Neither explanation fully satisfies. The truth may indeed lie between, nature providing the foundation, humans adding modifications, or somewhere we haven't yet considered. The formation rests silently on the Pacific floor, its origins as obscured as its features are visible, teaching us that some mysteries refuse simple categories. From contested structures beneath the ocean to undeniable enigmas above ground, our journey continues to a landscape where thousands of enormous stone vessels sit in mysterious clusters, their purpose lost to time and their creators unknown. Across the highlands of northern Laos, more than 2,000 enormous stone jars sit in mysterious clusters, some large enough to hold a person standing upright, each carved from solid rock. No one knows who made them. No one knows how they were moved. And despite decades of research, no one definitively knows why. The Plain of Jars encompasses over 90 distinct sites scattered across Xinkuang province, a mountainous region in northeastern Laos. The jars vary dramatically in size. The smallest barely reach knee height. The largest tower 3 meters tall and weigh an estimated 30 tons, comparable to the weight of 6 full-grown elephants or 20 automobiles. Each jar was carved from a single piece of stone, hollowed out through techniques that remain unclear, then transported to its current location from quarries located kilometers away. The stone itself varies by site. Some jars are sandstone, relatively soft and workable with primitive tools. Others are carved from granite or limestone, much harder materials, requiring considerable effort and expertise to shape. The fact that such diverse stones were used suggests either multiple cultural groups creating jars over extended periods, or a single culture adapting to available materials in different regions. Most jars are cylindrical or slightly conical, wider at the mouth than the base. A few feature carved lids, though whether these were original or added later remains uncertain. Some jars show evidence of decorative elements, carvings on the exterior or lip, but most are plain, their surfaces weathered by centuries of exposure to monsoon rains and tropical vegetation. The lack of extensive decoration distinguishes them from ceremonial vessels in other cultures, suggesting perhaps more utilitarian purposes. French archaeologist Madeleine Colani conducted the first systematic research on the Plain of Jars during the 1930s. Her excavations revealed cremated human remains, glass beads, bronze artifacts, and pottery fragments in and around some jars. Based on this evidence, Kalani proposed that the jars were mortuary vessels, large urns used for cremation or to hold remains after cremation elsewhere. This interpretation gained wide acceptance and remains the dominant theory, though significant problems persist. The cremated remains represent only a fraction of the jars. Most contain no human remains at all. If they were mortuary vessels, why are so many empty? Perhaps centuries of exposure leached away organic materials. Perhaps later populations disturbed or removed contents. Or perhaps only some jars served funerary purposes, while others fulfilled different functions entirely. Alternative theories abound. Some researchers suggest the jars were used for fermentation, storing rice wine or other alcoholic beverages during Iron Age festivals or ceremonies. The size would be consistent with large-scale brewing operations. The positioning in clusters could represent community gathering points where fermented beverages were stored and served during seasonal celebrations. However, no residue analysis has confirmed presence of alcohol or fermentation byproducts inside the jars. Another proposal suggests rainwater collection. In a region with distinct wet and dry seasons, large stone vessels could store water during monsoons for use during drier months. The jar's placement on hillsides and ridges, where they catch rainfall, supports this interpretation. Yet if water storage were the purpose, why carve such elaborate vessels when simpler systems would suffice? Why transport 30-ton stones across difficult terrain for basic water storage? The quarry sites identified several kilometers from jar locations add to the transport mystery. Moving multi-ton stone vessels across mountainous jungle terrain without wheels, draft animals, or metal tools represents a formidable engineering challenge. The most likely method involves log rollers, with teams of workers coordinating to move jars incrementally across prepared paths. The effort required suggests these objects held immense cultural significance. You don't move 30-ton stones without compelling motivation. Dating the jars proves frustratingly imprecise. Radiocarbon analysis of materials found near the jars suggests they were created and used during the Iron Age, roughly 500 BCE to 500 CE. However, this dating technique measures organic materials associated with the jars, not the stone vessels themselves. The jars could be significantly older, reused by Iron Age populations who left the datable artifacts archaeologists discovered. Without inscriptions or clear stratigraphic evidence, assigning precise dates remains speculative. The Vietnam War cast a dark shadow over the Plain of Jars. The region saw intense bombing campaigns throughout the 1960s and early 1970s. The Giga landscape remains contaminated with unexploded ordnance, cluster munitions, bombs, and mines that continued to kill and maim residents decades after the conflict ended. This deadly legacy severely restricted archaeological research for years. Only recently have systematic surveys resumed, and even now, researchers must carefully navigate cleared paths to avoid explosive remnants. Some jars were destroyed during the bombing. Others are damaged by shrapnel. The war disrupted centuries of relative stability, scattering populations and destroying traditional knowledge about the jars that might have survived in local oral histories. Elderly villagers who remember pre-war stories about the jars are increasingly rare, taking their knowledge to graves before researchers can document it systematically. UNESCO designated the Plain of Jars as a World Heritage Site in 2019, recognizing both its archaeological significance and the ongoing conservation challenges. The designation brings international attention and potentially resources for preservation and research. It also acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances a major archaeological site rendered partially inaccessible by modern warfare's unexploded legacy. Local legends offer colorful but historically questionable explanations. Some stories claim giants used the jars to brew celebratory rice wine after victories in ancient wars. Others describe the jars as storage vessels for a giant king's rice supply, created by an ancient race of enormous people who once inhabited the region. These tales, while culturally valuable, provide little insight into the jar's actual origins or purposes. The sheer number of jars, more than 2,000 across 90-plus sites, indicates sustained effort over considerable time. Whether created by a single culture or multiple groups, whether carved over decades or centuries, the Plain of Jars represents substantial investment of labor and resources. Societies don't create thousands of stone vessels weighing up to 30 tons each without powerful cultural, religious, or practical motivations. Comparison with other megalithic traditions worldwide reveals both similarities and unique features. Like dolmens in Korea or standing stones in Europe, the Plain of Jars demonstrates ancient capabilities for working and transporting massive stones. Unlike those traditions, the Laotian jars are hollow vessels rather than solid monuments, suggesting functional rather than purely symbolic purposes. This functional dimension makes the mystery more puzzling. Symbolic monuments can fulfill religious or social purposes we might not fully understand, but vessels imply specific, practical uses that remain frustratingly unclear. The Plain of Jars stands as testament to human ambition we can't fully comprehend. Massive stones carved and moved for purposes lost to time, mortuary vessels, fermentation vats, water storage, Perhaps their true function was so unlike anything in our experience that we literally can't recognize it. The jars offer no answers, only their silent bulk scattered across Laotian hillsides, enduring through wars and centuries, keeping secrets that may never be recovered. What we do know is this: someone considered these enormous stone vessels important enough to justify extraordinary effort. That significance, whatever it was, has evaporated, leaving only the incomprehensible monuments behind, while the jars of Laos pose questions about terrestrial purpose. Our next destination challenges assumptions about ancient maritime capabilities and the very boundaries of human settlement. Picture Venice, built not from brick and marble, but from massive hexagonal basalt columns weighing up to 50 tons each. Now place this city in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, 1,000 miles from the nearest continent, constructed by a civilization with no written records, no wheels, no metal tools, and no draft animals. This is Nan Madol, an architectural impossibility that exists anyway. The ancient city occupies a lagoon on the eastern shore of Pohnpei, a volcanic island in Micronesia. 92 artificial islets spread across approximately 200 acres, separated by tidal channels that serve as streets. Each islet was constructed by stacking enormous basalt columns and filling the spaces between with coral rubble. The columns themselves are natural formations, hexagonal, prismatic basalt created by volcanic cooling, but their arrangement into massive walls, platforms, and structures represents human engineering on a staggering scale. The Sardlur dynasty built Nan Madol between roughly 1200 and 1500 CE, according to radiocarbon dating and oral histories. These rulers made the artificial archipelago their ceremonial and political center, constructing separate islets for different functions: royal residences, administrative buildings, food preparation areas, canoe houses, and mortuaries. The most impressive structures include Nan Dawas, a royal mortuary featuring walls 18 feet high, built from basalt columns stacked like massive Lincoln logs, and Panwi, which may have served as the primary royal residence. Approximately 750,000 metric tons of basalt rock were used in Nan Madol's construction. To put that figure in perspective, that's roughly the weight of 3,550 blue whales, or enough rock to build nearly 100 Great Pyramids if scaled proportionally. Every single basalt column had to be quarried, transported, and positioned by human labor working without mechanical advantage beyond levers and possibly log rollers. The quarry sites have been identified on the opposite side of Pohnpei, across the island from Nan Madol. Some researchers suggest additional stone may have come from a smaller island nearby. Either way, the transportation challenges seem insurmountable. Moving 50-ton basalt logs across rugged volcanic terrain, through dense jungle, possibly over mountains, then across water to the construction site, all without wheels, without draft animals, without metal tools, strains credibility. Yet the city exists, its massive stones undeniably present, despite the logical impossibility of their placement. The construction technique itself demonstrates sophisticated understanding of materials and structural engineering. Basalt columns were laid horizontally in alternating directions, creating stable walls that have survived centuries of tropical storms, earthquakes, and tidal action. No mortar binds the stones. Gravity and friction alone hold the massive structures together. Coral rubble fills interior spaces, providing additional mass and stability, while creating level platforms atop the reef foundation. The tidal channels between islets present another engineering marvel. The city's builders constructed it in a lagoon with significant tidal fluctuation. The channels had to remain navigable at all tides, while providing adequate drainage and preventing silting. The positioning of islets creates a complex hydraulic system where tidal currents flush channels naturally, preventing the stagnation that would occur in still water. This suggests advanced understanding of fluid dynamics and long-term environmental planning. Local oral traditions offer explanations that mainstream archaeology dismisses but cannot entirely disprove. According to Pohnpeian legend, two sorcerers named Olisihpa and Olusopa constructed Nan Madol with magical assistance. The stones, legends claim, flew through the air to their positions, directed by supernatural forces. While archaeologists interpret such stories as mythologized descriptions of construction techniques now lost, the legends persist in local culture as legitimate historical accounts. The population estimates for Nan Madol at its peak range from several hundred to perhaps 1,000 people, primarily nobility and priests. The artificial city served as a ceremonial and administrative center, not a population center. The majority of Pohnpei's inhabitants lived in settlements around the island, venturing to Nan Madol for ceremonies, tribute payment, or administrative business. This functional separation, royal religious center, isolated from common settlements, mirrors patterns seen in other ancient societies, but taken to literal extremes by placing the elite center on separate artificial islands. The Saudeleur dynasty that built Nan Madol eventually collapsed, overthrown around 1500 CE by a warrior named Isoklekel, who established a new ruling system. Why the Saudeleur fell remains unclear. Oral histories suggest tyrannical rule prompted rebellion. Some researchers point to environmental factors. The effort required to maintain and expand Nan Madol may have overtaxed the island's resources. Others suggest external threats or disease. Whatever the cause, after the dynasty's fall, Nan Madol was gradually abandoned, left to the jungle and tides. When European explorers first encountered Pohnpei in the 16th century, they noted Lichar ruins, but didn't investigate thoroughly. Systematic documentation didn't begin until the 19th century. Polish ethnographer Johann Kubary provided the first detailed description in the 1870s. Later researchers, including American archaeologist Rufino Mauricio and Australian adventurer Bill Ballinger, contributed to mapping and understanding the complex. Yet even today, significant portions of Nan Madol remain unexcavated and unstudied. Comparison with Venice, Nan Madol's European parallel, highlights both similarities and crucial differences. Both cities were built on water for defensive and commercial advantages. Both feature channels serving as streets and boats as primary transportation. Both represent extraordinary feats of hydraulic engineering. But Venice was built by a literate society with advanced metal tools, extensive trade networks, providing resources, and documented construction techniques we can study and understand. Nan Madol was built by a pre-literate culture using Stone Age technology, in isolation from major trade networks, by methods that remain largely mysterious. The stone columns themselves have sparked geological interest. The hexagonal basalt formations, unnatural, volcanic cooling creates these geometric patterns through contraction fracturing. Similar formations appear at the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland and Devil's Postpile in California. What's unusual about Nan Madol? is the sheer quantity of these formations gathered in one place. Either Pompeii had unusually extensive basalt column deposits that were systematically harvested, or the builders transported stone from multiple sites across greater distances than currently recognized. The site faces modern preservation challenges. Rising sea levels threaten to submerge the lower portions of structures. Mangrove trees colonizing the ruins accelerate stone degradation as roots penetrate and widen cracks. Tourism brings both beneficial attention and damaging foot traffic. The Federated States of Micronesia government has sought UNESCO World Heritage designation to attract conservation funding. But effective preservation requires resources the small nation struggles to provide. Archaeological investigation has been hampered by Nan Madol's location and condition. Dense jungle vegetation covers many structures. Water surrounds and often floods lower sections. Excavation requires navigating tidal channels in small boats while hauling equipment through difficult terrain. The humid tropical environment accelerates equipment deterioration and makes extended field seasons challenging. These practical difficulties mean much of Nan Madol remains archaeologically unexplored, despite its significance. The question of why returns repeatedly. Why build an entire city on artificial islands? Defensive advantages are obvious. Attackers must approach by water, making surprise difficult and assault dangerous. But the effort seems disproportionate to the threat. Pompeii faced no major military rivals requiring such elaborate defenses. Religious or ceremonial motivations seem more plausible. Perhaps separating sacred spaces from profane required literal geographic isolation. Perhaps demonstrating the ruler's power to command massive construction projects justified the effort itself. Perhaps purposes existed that we can't reconstruct from archaeology and oral histories alone. Nan Madol shouldn't exist by the logic of conventional engineering and resource management. A megalithic city built on a reef lagoon by people with Stone Age technology, using 750,000 tons of basalt, transported from across a mountainous island, maintained for 3 centuries, then abandoned and largely forgotten. Yet there it stands, slowly sinking into the Pacific, mangroves claiming what human ambition built, stone by impossible stone. The ruins mock our assumptions about ancient capabilities, challenging us to explain accomplishments that seem beyond the available means. The builders left no written records explaining their methods. They left only the stones themselves, silent, massive, and mysteriously present despite all the reasons they shouldn't be. From the Pacific's artificial city to the Atlantic's submerged enigma, structures beneath the waves continue to pose questions about ancient civilizations and the landscapes they inhabited before the seas rose. In 1968, a team of divers off Bimini Island in the Bahamas discovered something extraordinary beneath shallow Caribbean waters. Dr. J. Manson Valentine, a marine biologist and archaeologist, along with divers Jacques Mayol and Robert Angove, documented a half-mile of rectangular limestone blocks arranged in near-perfect lines along the seabed. The formation stretched approximately 800 meters, featuring stones up to 4 meters in length and 3 meters in width, positioned as if forming an ancient road or wall. Geologists insisted it was beach rock, limestone formations created naturally through cementation of sand and shell fragments in the intertidal zone. Alternative researchers claimed it was evidence of Atlantis, or at minimum, remnants of an advanced pre-Columbian civilization. 6 decades later, the debate remains unresolved, the Bimini Road stubbornly refusing to yield definitive answers. Either way, the discovery's timing seemed almost prophetic. In 1940, American psychic Edgar Cayce predicted that a portion of the temples may yet be discovered under the slime of ages and seawater near Bimini, expected in 68 or 69, not so far away. Whether coincidence or genuine precognition, Valentine's 1968 discovery occurred precisely when Cayce foretold, fueling speculation that the formation represented ruins of the legendary lost continent. The blocks themselves are undeniably regular. Most measure roughly rectangular, though dimensions vary. They are arranged in relatively straight lines with occasional angular turns that resemble primitive road construction or foundation walls. Some blocks appear to sit atop smaller stones, suggesting possible pillar or support structures beneath. The water depth ranges from 2 to 7 meters, depending on tidal conditions and specific location along the formation. The geological explanation focuses on beach rock formation processes. In tropical waters, calcium carbonate from dissolved shells and coral cements beach sand into solid limestone. This process occurs in the intertidal zone, where sand remains saturated with seawater. Over time, the cementing creates hardened rock that can fracture along natural lines as sea levels change and tidal stresses create cracks. The resulting blocks can appear rectangular, their edges defined by fracture patterns rather than human tools. Natural jointing, the tendency of sedimentary rocks to crack along parallel planes, could explain the linear arrangement. Beach rock often develops perpendicular fracture sets, creating a grid-like pattern of natural blocks. Wave action and currents can then transport or rotate these blocks, potentially aligning them in ways that appear intentional. Geologists point to similar beach rock formations elsewhere in the Bahamas and Caribbean that display geometric regularity without human involvement. Yet certain features challenge purely geological interpretation. Some blocks appear too uniformly sized and spaced to result from random fracturing. The straight line arrangement extends for considerable distance with minimal deviation, unusual for natural formations subject to random erosional forces. Some researchers have noted what appear to be tool marks on block surfaces, though others attribute these features to natural abrasion or biological activity. Dr. Valentine's original documentation included sketches and measurements suggesting architectural purpose. He identified what he interpreted as foundation stones, support pillars, and even possible building remains beyond the main linear formation. Additional underwater features in the vicinity, including formations dubbed the Bimini Wall, seemed to Valentine to indicate a larger complex of which the road was merely the most visible component. Subsequent investigations have produced contradictory results depending on the researchers' prior assumptions. Believers in human construction find evidence supporting that interpretation. Too regular spacing, apparent modifications, blocks positioned on support stones. Skeptics see natural beach rock displaying typical fracture patterns, random irregularities in spacing, variation in block orientation, and absence of definitive cut marks or architectural features. The sea level history adds temporal context. During the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago, Caribbean sea levels stood significantly lower than today. The Bimini Road formation would have been above water, on dry land, accessible to any population inhabiting the region. If the structure is man-made, it was built before rising seas submerged it, placing construction in the pre-Clovis period, when conventional archaeology recognizes only hunter-gatherer populations in the Americas. This chronological problem mirrors challenges at other sites. If humans built roads or harbors at Bimini 10,000 or more years ago, who were they? The earliest accepted archaeological evidence of Bahamian habitation dates to roughly 300 to 400 CE, with the arrival of Lycaean peoples from Hispaniola. Evidence of earlier occupation is sparse to non-existent. A sophisticated culture capable of engineering stone construction would presumably leave other archaeological traces, tools, pottery, habitation sites. None have been found. Alternative theories propose various explanations. Some researchers suggest Bimini represents remnants of a trading post or ceremonial site built by ancient mariners, perhaps Phoenicians, ancient Egyptians, or other Old World seafarers reaching the Americas millennia before Columbus. These theories require accepting transoceanic contact long before conventional timelines allow, supported more by speculation than by archaeological evidence. The Atlantis connection persists despite lack of supporting data. Plato's description of Atlantis in his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, places the lost civilization in the Atlantic beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which could hypothetically include the Caribbean. Proponents argue that Bimini might represent peripheral ruins of a larger civilization centered elsewhere, possibly now submerged on the continental shelf. Skeptics counter that Plato's account was philosophical allegory, not historical record, and that searching for literal Atlantis is intellectually misguided. Modern surveying technology, including side-scan sonar and underwater photogrammetry, has mapped the formation in detail. These surveys reveal that while the main linear feature is striking, the blocks show considerable variation in size, orientation, and positioning. Some blocks sit at angles inconsistent with deliberate construction. Others are partially buried or displaced in ways suggesting natural movement over time, rather than original architectural placement. Biological colonization complicates interpretation. Centuries underwater have covered the stones with marine growth, algae, coral, sponges, and other organisms that obscure surface details. Determining whether particular features are tool marks or natural erosion becomes nearly impossible without removing biological material, which would damage the ecosystem and potentially destroy evidence. The formation exists in a Schrödinger-like state, simultaneously supporting multiple interpretations until definitive evidence collapses the possibilities. The debate has grown less heated over decades as neither side has produced conclusive proof. Proponents of human construction haven't found artifacts, tools, or clear architectural features that would settle the question. Geological skeptics haven't explained all the formation's regularities through purely natural processes. The Bimini Road occupies an interpretive grey zone where both explanations remain plausible but neither fully convincing. Perhaps that ambiguity itself teaches something valuable. Not every mystery demands resolution. Not every ancient formation fits cleanly into categories of natural or artificial. The Bimini Road might be natural limestone fractured and arranged by tidal forces. It might be human construction eroded and degraded by millennia of wave action. It might be something in between. Natural formations recognized and enhanced by ancient peoples who saw potential in shapes that geology provided. The formation continues attracting divers, researchers, and curiosity seekers. Each interprets what they see through their own frameworks. Geologists see beach rock, alternative archaeologists see evidence of lost civilizations, tourists see underwater mystery. All perceive the same physical reality, yet extract vastly different meanings from rectangular blocks beneath Caribbean waves. Bimini Road remains stubbornly ambiguous, regular enough to suggest human hands, irregular enough to plausibly be natural. Some mysteries refuse clean solutions. They exist in grey spaces between what we want to believe and what evidence proves, reminding us that certainty isn't always available, and that sometimes the most honest answer is simply, we don't know. The underwater ambiguity of Bimini finds its terrestrial counterpart in the American Southwest, where ancient dwellings cling to cliff faces in locations so impractical they provoke immediate questions about both construction methods and abandonment motives. Tucked beneath a massive sandstone overhang in southwestern Colorado, 150 individual rooms and 23 ceremonial kivas form the largest cliff dwelling in North America. Cliff Palace isn't perched on a cliff. It's built into an alcove high on the canyon wall, accessible only by precarious hand and toe hold trails carved into the rock face. The ancestral Puebloans constructed this architectural marvel in one of the most impractical locations conceivable, invested perhaps a century of effort into its development, then abandoned it after barely 3 generations of occupation. The dwelling dates to approximately 1190 to 1260 CE, based on tree ring analysis of wooden beams incorporated into the masonry. The ancestral Puebloans, previously called Anasazi, were sophisticated agriculturalists who had occupied Mesa Verde for centuries before moving into cliff alcoves. Their earlier structures were built on mesa tops and in open canyons. The sudden shift to defensible cliff dwellings around 1200 CE suggests changing circumstances, though whether those circumstances involved warfare, climate stress, or cultural transformation remains debated. Cliff Palace housed an estimated 100 people at its peak population. The alcove measures approximately 89 meters long and 27 meters deep, with a natural overhang providing protection from rain and snow, while allowing winter sun to warm the structures and summer shade to keep them cool. This passive solar heating and cooling demonstrates sophisticated understanding of environmental design. The natural acoustics within the alcove would have carried voices and sounds throughout the dwelling, creating an intimate acoustic environment for the community. The construction incorporates sandstone blocks mortared with mud, wooden beams supporting roofs and upper stories, and plastered interior walls. The masonry quality varies. Some walls display careful coursing with shaped stones, while others show more expedient construction using whatever rocks came to hand. This variation might indicate different construction phases, different builders, or simply functional differences where some structures required greater structural integrity than others. The 23 kivas deserve particular attention. These circular or D-shaped chambers, built partially or fully below ground level, served as ceremonial spaces for ancestral Puebloan religious practices. Each kiva features a fire pit, ventilation shaft, deflector stone to control airflow, and a sipapu, a small hole in the floor representing the symbolic place of emergence, from which, according to Puebloan tradition, humans first entered this world. The number of kivas relative to residential rooms suggests that ceremonial life occupied central importance in Cliff Palace society. The logistics of daily life in this location pose immediate practical questions. The alcove contains no natural water source. Every drop of water consumed by residents, used for cooking, employed in construction, or given to crops had to be carried up from Spruce Tree Creek, flowing at the canyon bottom. During winter, when ice made cliff trails treacherous, water collection became genuinely dangerous. The round-trip journey from dwelling to water and back would have consumed significant time and energy daily. Agricultural fields existed on the mesa top above Cliff Palace, not within the alcove itself. Mesa Verde's name, Spanish for green table, reflects the flat-topped mountains covered with piñon and juniper forest. The ancestral Puebloans cleared areas for corn, beans, and squash cultivation. But farming on the mesa meant daily climbs up and down cliff trails, carrying tools, seeds, harvested crops, and everything else agricultural life requires. The commute alone seems exhausting. Why choose such an impractical location? The defensive advantages are obvious. Cliff dwellings are easily defended. A few people at the access trails could prevent larger forces from reaching the alcove. Approaching enemies would be visible long before reaching the dwelling. Residents could retreat to defensible positions and hold off attackers with minimal manpower. This suggests the ancestral Puebloans faced genuine threats requiring defensive architecture, though archaeological evidence of widespread warfare in Mesa Verde region during this period remains limited. Climate data provides alternative explanation. Tree ring studies reveal that the late 1200s experienced severe drought throughout the American Southwest. Water sources dried up. Agricultural yields declined. Competition for diminishing resources intensified. Moving into cliff alcoves might have been strategic response to resource scarcity. Concentrating populations near reliable water sources, consolidating communities for mutual support, or simply moving to locations that offered better microclimate conditions during drought years. Religious or cultural motivations also merit consideration. Perhaps the move to alcoves reflected changing spiritual beliefs, with caves holding special significance in Puebloan cosmology as places closer to the Sipapu, or more conducive to communication with ancestral spirits. The dramatic increase in kiva construction during the cliff dwelling period suggests heightened ceremonial activity, possibly reflecting attempts to address environmental or social crises through religious intensification. The abandonment proves as mysterious as the initial construction. By 1300 CE, Cliff Palace and the other Mesa Verde cliff dwellings stood empty. Tree ring data indicates the drought conditions worsened through the late 13th century. The final blow likely came in the 1280s and 1290s, when 2 decades of particularly severe drought made continued occupation untenable. Water sources failed, crops withered, game animals migrated elsewhere. The ancestral Puebloans had to leave or die, but they didn't leave randomly. Archaeological evidence suggests organized departure rather than panicked flight. Residents took portable valuables, pottery, tools, textiles. They filled granaries and sealed kivas, suggesting intention to return once conditions improved. They never did. The ancestral Puebloans migrated primarily southward and eastward, their descendants forming modern Puebloan communities, including Hopi, Zuni, and the Rio Grande Pueblos. These communities maintain oral traditions about Mesa Verde as ancestral homeland. The discovery of Cliff Palace by European Americans came relatively late. Those Spanish explorers passed through the region in the 18th century, They either didn't notice the cliff dwellings or didn't record them. In December 1888, ranchers Richard Wetherill and Charlie Mason were searching for stray cattle when they looked across the canyon and saw the dwelling tucked in its alcove. Their initial exploration revealed the site's extraordinary scale and preservation. Wetherill would go on to discover many additional Mesa Verde sites over subsequent years. Early archaeological work at Cliff Palace was more salvage than science. Wetherill and others removed artifacts for private collections and museums with little systematic documentation. Pottery, baskets, tools, and human remains left the site, scattered to institutions and private hands across the country. This early collecting provided museums with ancestral Puebloan materials, but destroyed contextual information that careful excavation would have preserved. Mesa Verde became a national park in 1906, partly through advocacy by groups concerned about ongoing looting and artifact removal. The park designation brought protection, but also tourism. Cliff Palace became, and remains, one of Mesa Verde's most popular attractions, visited by hundreds of thousands annually. This visitation brings needed attention and funding, but also accelerates site deterioration through foot traffic, temperature and humidity changes from human presence, and inadvertent touching of fragile structures. Conservation presents ongoing challenges. The sandstone is inherently friable, prone to flaking and erosion. Natural seepage from the cliff above deposits minerals that stain and deteriorate original plaster. Wooden beams, though protected by the dry climate and alcove shelter, slowly deteriorate over centuries. Park Service conservators continuously monitor structural stability, repair damaged areas, and implement measures to slow inevitable decay. The question isn't whether Cliff Palace will eventually return to dust, but how long preservation efforts can delay that outcome. Comparison to other cliff dwellings worldwide reveals both universal patterns and unique features. Mediterranean regions contain cliff dwellings carved directly into soft stone faces. Cappadocia in Turkey, Matera in Italy, Mesa Verde's North American counterparts. Most shared motivation of defense or utilizing otherwise marginal land. What distinguishes Mesa Verde is the construction technique. Building freestanding structures within natural alcoves rather than excavating directly into cliff faces, and the relatively brief occupation period before abandonment. Cliff Palace endures as testimony to human adaptability and determination. The ancestral Puebloans recognized the alcove's potential, assessed the practical difficulties, and concluded the advantages outweighed the costs. For several generations, they made it work, raising children, conducting ceremonies, maintaining culture in this unlikely location. When circumstances changed beyond adaptation's capacity, they moved on, leaving these rooms and kivas silent. The dwelling stands empty now, its rooms open to sky rather than roofed, its kivas exposed rather than enclosed. Modern visitors walk through spaces that once buzzed with daily life. Children playing, pottery being crafted, ceremonies conducted, meals shared. The stones remain, but the lives they sheltered have departed, following waters and opportunities elsewhere, leaving only architecture to hint at the community that briefly called this impractical, remarkable place home. The abandonment of Cliff Palace mirrors another mysterious exodus, but on a scale that dwarfs Colorado canyons, an entire civilization in southern Africa that rose to prominence and vanished from power. leaving only massive stone walls as evidence of their achievement. Massive stone walls rise from the African savanna, some 11 meters high and 6 meters thick, built from precisely fitted granite blocks without a single drop of mortar. Great Zimbabwe housed 18,000 people at its peak and controlled trade across southern Africa. The Kingdom of Zimbabwe prospered for centuries, constructed sophisticated architecture, and participated in international commerce reaching as far as China. Yet when European colonists discovered these ruins in the 19th century, they insisted Africans couldn't have built them. The site covers approximately 1,800 acres in southeastern Zimbabwe, encompassing multiple architectural zones. The hill complex sits atop a granite kopje overlooking the valley, featuring walls that follow natural rock formations. The great enclosure dominates the valley floor, a massive elliptical structure with outer walls reaching 11 meters in height and incorporating an estimated 900,000 granite blocks. Between these major structures lie numerous smaller enclosures, walls and platforms that once formed a thriving urban center. The Kingdom of Zimbabwe emerged around 1100 CE, though earlier occupation dates back centuries. The civilization reached its apex between the 13th and 15th centuries, controlling trade routes that connected the African interior to Indian Ocean ports. Gold, ivory, and other resources flowed from Zimbabwe's territory to Swahili coast trading cities, then onward to Arabia, Persia, India, and China. Archaeological excavations have uncovered Chinese porcelain, Persian glass beads, and other luxury goods documenting Zimbabwe's integration into international medieval trade networks. The construction technique displays remarkable sophistication. Builders selected granite blocks from natural rock formations, choosing stones whose shapes required minimal modification. The blocks were then carefully fitted together in courses, with each stone selected for how its irregular surface would interlock with neighbors. No mortar binds the stones. Friction and careful placement alone hold walls standing after 7 centuries. The outer walls of the great enclosure are double-layered with a rubble core between facing stones, providing additional stability and mass. The precision of the stonework varies throughout the site. Some walls display expert craftsmanship with tightly fitted stones, creating smooth faces. Others show more functional construction, where appearance mattered less than structural adequacy. This variation likely reflects different construction phases, different builders, or different purposes for various structures. The most expertly crafted walls appear in the great enclosure and certain sections of the hill complex, areas presumably associated with elite residence or ceremonial functions. Approximately 1 million granite blocks were used across the entire complex. Quarrying this quantity of stone, selecting appropriate blocks, transporting them to construction sites, and fitting them precisely required organized labor on a massive scale. Population estimates suggest 18,000 people lived in and around Great Zimbabwe at the city's peak, providing adequate workforce for ongoing construction and maintenance, while supporting the agricultural, commercial, and political activities of a regional capital. The great enclosure itself measures 250 meters in circumference, with walls up to 11 meters high. Inside this massive structure stands a solid conical tower, 10 meters tall and 5 meters in diameter at the base, built entirely from granite blocks. The tower's purpose remains uncertain. It contains no interior space, no obvious functional purpose. Suggestions include phallic symbolism, grain storage support or royal authority display, but no definitive evidence confirms any interpretation. The tower simply stands, enigmatic and solid, at the heart of Zimbabwe's largest structure. When European explorers and colonists encountered Great Zimbabwe in the 19th century, they faced evidence of sophisticated African architecture that contradicted prevailing racial theories. Rather than acknowledge indigenous achievement, European observers attributed the ruins to Phoenicians, ancient Israelites, or even the Queen of Sheba. German explorer Karl Mauch, visiting in 1871, insisted the ruins were built by non-Africans, citing biblical and classical sources to support European or Middle Eastern construction. This denial had profound consequences. Colonial authorities in Rhodesia, named after British imperialist Cecil Rhodes, used the supposed non-African origin of Great Zimbabwe to justify European rule. If Africans couldn't build sophisticated architecture, European colonizers reasoned, they required European governance. Archaeological research that suggested African origins faced official suppression. The Rhodesian government actively promoted alternative theories and restricted publication of findings that confirmed indigenous construction. British archaeologist David Randall McIver's 1905 excavation provided clear evidence that Great Zimbabwe was built by ancestors of the Shona people between 1100 to 1400 CE. His conclusions, based on pottery styles, construction techniques, and artifact analysis, demonstrated conclusively that the ruins were medieval African achievement. Colonial authorities rejected his findings. The controversy continued for decades, with political ideology overriding archaeological evidence. Gertrude Ketton Thompson's 1929 excavation reinforced Randall McIver's conclusions through more extensive research and rigorous methodology. She documented the absence of any artifacts suggesting Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, or European presence during the construction period. Every artifact, pottery, tools, decorative objects, matched known Shona cultural traditions. The building techniques, architectural styles, and site organization all reflected indigenous African development without external influence. Her work definitively established African origin, yet colonial ideology persisted in denying the obvious. The 8 soapstone birds discovered at Great Zimbabwe have become national symbols, appearing on the Zimbabwean flag and currency. These carved sculptures, each about 40 centimeters tall, depict birds of prey atop decorated columns. Their exact symbolic meaning remains debated, possibly representing royal ancestors, divine messengers, or political authority. What's clear is their unique artistic style, found only at Great Zimbabwe and related sites, marking them as products of a sophisticated, indigenous artistic tradition. Goldworking represents another dimension of Zimbabwe's cultural achievement. Gold objects found at the site demonstrate advanced metallurgical knowledge. The kingdom controlled gold mining operations throughout its territory, with gold serving as primary export commodity in Indian Ocean trade. European colonizers were primarily interested in Zimbabwe's gold resources, viewing the medieval ruins mainly as evidence of earlier gold working that could guide modern mining operations. The site's economy wasn't solely based on trade. Archaeological evidence reveals substantial agricultural activity, cattle herding, craft production, and local exchange networks. Terraced hillsides near the ruins indicate intensive agricultural development. Cattle bones suggest large herds, cattle ownership serving as a wealth marker in Shona culture, then as now. Great Zimbabwe functioned as integrated urban center, not merely trading post. The city's decline began around 1450 CE. Multiple factors likely contributed. Environmental degradation from overgrazing and deforestation may have damaged local resources. Political fragmentation might have disrupted trade networks. Climate shifts affecting rainfall patterns could have stressed agricultural systems. The rise of competing trade centers like Kami and Mutapa drew commercial activity elsewhere. By 1500 CE, Great Zimbabwe was largely abandoned. Its population dispersed to other settlements as political and economic power shifted northward. The ruins fell into relative obscurity for centuries, known to local populations but largely unvisited by outsiders until the 19th century colonial period. Shona oral traditions maintain knowledge of the site's significance and indigenous construction, though specific details of the kingdom's history had faded from memory. The ruins were never truly lost. They were simply forgotten by literate civilizations that might have recorded them. Modern Zimbabwe adopted the ancient site as national symbol after independence in 1980. The country's name itself, Zimbabwe, derives from the Shona term for the ruins, which translates roughly as houses of stone or venerated houses. This reclamation of indigenous heritage represented repudiation of colonial ideology that had denied African achievement for over a century. The ruins now serve as a powerful reminder that African civilizations created sophisticated architecture, participated in international trade, and developed complex political systems long before European contact. Great Zimbabwe challenges more than colonial prejudice. It questions our assumptions about what qualifies as historical achievement. The absence of written records meant Zimbabwe's history came primarily through archaeology and oral tradition rather than documents. European historiography traditionally privileged literate civilizations, viewing non-literate societies as inherently less advanced. Great Zimbabwe demonstrates that architectural sophistication, economic complexity, and political organization don't require writing systems. Different cultures develop different technologies based on their specific needs and circumstances. The stones stand as mute witnesses to human capability deliberately ignored. For a century, evidence of African architectural achievement was systematically denied by those whose worldview couldn't accommodate it. Archaeological science eventually prevailed over ideology, but the delay cost understanding and perpetuated harmful myths. Great Zimbabwe's history reminds us that discovering the past isn't just about excavation. It's about confronting present biases that shape what we're willing to see. From a civilization whose achievements were deliberately denied to one whose purpose remains genuinely mysterious despite all available evidence, we descend now into the earth itself, where entire cities were carved from living rock for reasons that continue to perplex. In 1963, a man in Derinkuyu, Turkey, was renovating his basement. He knocked down a wall intending to expand his storage space. Behind the wall, he found a tunnel. The tunnel led to a room. That room opened to another tunnel. Those tunnels connected to more rooms, which led to more tunnels, descending deeper and deeper into the earth. He'd accidentally discovered an entrance to Derinkuyu, an 18-story underground city carved entirely from soft volcanic rock, extending 85 meters beneath his house, capable of sheltering 20,000 people. The city wasn't unknown to locals. Residents had long known about caves and tunnels beneath Derinkuyu, using them for storage or as cool retreats during hot summers. What the 1963 discovery revealed was the system's true extent and sophistication. This wasn't a collection of random caves. It was planned architecture, executed underground, featuring living spaces, food storage rooms, stables for livestock, wine presses, chapels, schools, and even a sophisticated ventilation system with 52 air shafts reaching the surface. Derinkuyu is one of several underground cities in the Cappadocia region, carved from the soft volcanic tuff deposited by ancient eruptions from nearby Mount Ertis and Mount Hassan. The rock is ideal for excavation, soft enough to carve with simple hand tools when first exposed, yet hardening upon contact with air to form durable structures. This geological gift allowed ancient populations to hollow out enormous volumes of rock relatively efficiently compared to harder stone. The dating of Derinkuyu's original construction remains uncertain. Some sections may date to the Hittite period around 1200 BCE. Phrygian populations likely expanded the complex around the 8th to 7th centuries BCE. Later inhabitants, including early Christians fleeing Roman persecution in the 2nd, 3rd centuries CE, added more levels and features. The Byzantine period saw further expansion as Christian communities sought refuge from Arab raids in the 7th, 8th centuries. The underground city served different populations over millennia, each adding to the existing structure. The engineering demonstrates remarkable sophistication for any period. The ventilation system deserves particular attention. 52 air shafts extend from the deepest levels to the surface, some reaching depths of 85 meters. These shafts provided fresh air to all levels simultaneously, preventing suffocation in the deepest chambers. The shafts were carefully positioned to avoid creating through drafts that would reveal the city's presence to surface observers, while still providing adequate air circulation. Some shafts also functioned as water wells, bringing groundwater to various levels. The defensive architecture reveals paranoia or prudence on extraordinary scale. Each level could be sealed from the inside using large circular stone doors. These doors, carved from solid rock and weighing between 200 to 500 kilograms each, rolled on pivot points to block passage tunnels. Once in place, they were nearly impossible to move from the attacking side due to their weight and the lack of handholds. A small hole through each door allowed defenders to observe or attack anyone attempting to breach it, while the door itself could withstand significant force. Living spaces on different levels indicate social stratification, even underground. Upper levels contained more spacious rooms with better ventilation, presumably occupied by elites or religious authorities. Lower levels featured smaller, more cramped quarters for common residents. The stables were positioned where animal waste and odors would affect the fewest people. Wine presses and food storage occupied separate areas, suggesting organized distribution systems. Schools and chapels received placement near living areas, but remained distinct, maintaining functional separation of domestic, religious, and educational spaces. The capacity estimates of 20,000 people are based on available living space, water supply, and ventilation capabilities. That population could survive underground for extended periods, weeks or potentially months, if adequately provisioned before sealing themselves in. Archaeological evidence suggests the city was indeed used for extended habitation during siege or threat periods, not merely as temporary shelter. During brief raids, tunnels connecting Derinkuyu to other underground cities add another dimension to this subterranean world. Some passages extend for kilometers, linking multiple settlements in a network that would have allowed populations to move between cities without surfacing. These connections suggest coordinated defensive strategy across the region, with communities able to communicate and provide mutual support through underground routes invisible to surface threats. The question of why dominates discussions of Derinkuyu as much as questions of how. What threat justified this extreme response? Simple defensive structures, walls, towers, fortified buildings, would require far less effort than carving 18 stories into bedrock. The investment here suggests fears that surface defenses couldn't address. Were they hiding from invading armies that could overcome conventional fortifications? Fleeing religious persecution that would destroy any visible sanctuary? Escaping climate catastrophes that made surface survival temporarily impossible? Each historical period that used Derinkuyu faced different threats. Phrygians might have sought protection from Sumerian invasions in the 8th to 7th centuries BCE. Early Christians definitely used underground complexes to avoid Roman persecution. Historical records confirm this. Byzantine Christians faced Arab raids that conventional defenses struggled to prevent. In each case, going underground offered security the surface structures couldn't provide. Modern analogies help contextualize the scope. Derinkuyu represents roughly the equivalent of carving out 50 modern three-story houses entirely underground, including all infrastructure, ventilation, and defensive systems, using only hand tools. The volume of rock removed would fill dozens of Olympic swimming pools. The planning required, ventilation calculations, structural load assessments, drainage considerations, exceeds what we typically credit to ancient societies. The soft volcanic tuff made excavation physically possible, but created other challenges. The material is prone to erosion and collapse if not properly maintained. Support pillars had to be left in strategic locations. Ceiling thickness had to balance allowing maximum space against preventing roof collapse. Drainage systems had to prevent water accumulation that would weaken structures. The builders demonstrated sophisticated understanding of structural engineering principles applied to negative space. Architecture through subtraction rather than addition. Comparison with Cappadocia's fairy chimneys, natural rock formations carved into homes and churches, shows different approaches to using the same geological resource. Surface structures in fairy chimneys are visible, accessible, integrated into the landscape. Underground cities like Derinkuyu are hidden, defensible, separate from surface world. Both used volcanic tuff's carvability, but for opposite purposes. One, embracing visibility, the other seeking concealment. The city's preservation through millennia owes much to continuous use. Abandoned underground structures often collapse as support deteriorates, ventilation shafts clog, and water infiltration damages walls. Derinkuyu remained occupied, or at least maintained through multiple periods, with each population repairing and improving existing structures. Only in relatively recent centuries did the complex fall into disuse, and even then, local residents knew about portions they used for storage. Tourism now threatens what time hadn't. Thousands of visitors annually descend into Derinkuyu, bringing moisture from breath and body heat, touching walls and eroding surfaces, creating vibrations that stress ancient structures. Turkish authorities have implemented visitor limits and monitoring systems, but the tension between public access and preservation remains. The more people who experience this underground marvel, the more its ancient fabric degrades. Archaeological investigation faces unique challenges underground. Excavation removes material that helps support tunnels. Mapping requires surveying in cramped, dark conditions. Artifacts found at various levels may have been moved by later occupants, making stratigraphic interpretation complex. Many passages remain blocked by rubble or intentional filling, hiding portions of the complex that could answer remaining questions about its full extent and earliest construction. Derinkuyu forces us to ask what we would do with similar fears. Modern bunkers exist, but nothing approaches this scale and sophistication achieved with hand tools in volcanic rock. We build for different threats now: nuclear fallout, biological hazards, climate extremes. But the impulse remains identical. When the surface world becomes too dangerous, going underground offers protection. Whether ancient peoples overreacted to their threats or understood dangers we don't appreciate remains unknowable. What's certain is they took the threats seriously enough to carve cities beneath their feet. The tunnels descend into darkness. Ventilation shafts reach toward distant sky. Stone doors stand open now for tourists, where they once sealed desperate populations inside. Whatever Derinkuyu's builders feared, it was real enough to justify years of excavation, sophisticated enough to require engineered solutions, and persistent enough to keep multiple civilizations returning to these chambers across millennia. The stones remember the labor, the fear, the ingenuity. They don't judge whether the response was proportionate. They simply endure, hollowed out and waiting, ready to shelter should surface threats return. The defensive underground architecture of Derinkuyu mirrors defensive surface architecture elsewhere, where massive interlocking stones created fortifications that have withstood centuries of earthquakes, while modern engineers struggle to explain their construction. The Spanish conquistadors, who first saw Sacsayhuaman in 1533, believed demons built it. How else to explain stones weighing 200 tons fitted together with such precision that a knife blade can't slip between them? How else to account for massive blocks cut and shaped into polygonal forms that interlock like three-dimensional puzzles? Spanish chronicler Pedro Sancho wrote that the fortress seemed the work of the devil rather than of men. Modern engineers examining these walls have reached more secular but equally remarkable conclusions. They couldn't replicate this construction with current technology. The complex sits on a hill overlooking Cusco, capital of the Inca Empire. Construction began under the reign of Pachacuti in the mid-15th century and continued for decades, possibly into the early 16th century, before the Spanish conquest interrupted the work. The site served multiple functions: fortress, ceremonial center, storage facility, and symbol of imperial power. The name Sacsayhuaman translates roughly as satisfied falcon in Quechua, though its original name and full purpose remain subjects of scholarly debate. Three massive zigzag walls form the primary defensive structure, each wall rising behind the other on the hillside. The walls stretch approximately 540 meters in length, with heights reaching up to 6 meters. The largest stones, positioned in the lower courses where they bear the greatest structural loads, weigh an estimated 200 tons. That's equivalent to roughly 130 automobiles or 33 adult African elephants. These colossal blocks weren't simple rectangular shapes, but complex polygonal forms with multiple angles and curved surfaces, each stone unique in its geometry, yet fitting perfectly against its neighbors. The precision of the stonework defies easy explanation. Joints between stones often measure less than a millimeter in width. The surfaces match so exactly that inserting paper between blocks proves impossible in many locations. This isn't uniform throughout. Some sections display cruder construction, possibly representing different phases or different purposes. But the finest walls exhibit craftsmanship that challenges modern capabilities. The stones were quarried from several sites, with the primary quarry located at Muina, approximately 20 kilometers from Sacsayhuaman. Secondary quarries existed closer to the construction site, transporting 200-ton blocks across 20 kilometers of mountainous Andean terrain presents engineering challenges that conventional explanations struggle to address convincingly. The standard theory involves thousands of workers using rope and log rollers to drag stones incrementally across prepared pathways. The logistics of coordinating such operations, the ropes required, the number of workers, the food and water needed to sustain them, seem barely plausible for the quantities and distances involved. Spanish chronicles provide some clues about construction methods, though their accounts were written after the fact based on Inca oral traditions and Spanish speculation. Garcilaso de la Vega, son of a Spanish conquistador and an Inca princess, wrote that 20,000 men quarried and transported the stones, while another 4,000 worked on the actual construction. He described elaborate systems of ramps and human power, with workers singing coordinated songs to synchronize their efforts during transport and placement. His account, while colorful, lacks technical detail about exactly how specific engineering challenges were overcome. The polygonal stone shapes add complexity beyond simple transport logistics. Each stone required individual shaping to fit its designated position. The blocks aren't stacked in regular courses like conventional masonry. Instead, they interlock in irregular patterns with stones of vastly different sizes fitting together seamlessly. This approach distributes loads more effectively than rectangular blocks and provides superior earthquake resistance, a critical consideration in a seismically active region. Cusco sits in an earthquake zone that has experienced numerous significant tremors over the past 5 centuries. Colonial Spanish buildings in Cusco have repeatedly sustained damage or collapsed during earthquakes. The Inca walls, including those at Sacsayhuaman, have largely survived intact. The polygonal construction allows stones to move slightly during seismic events, absorbing and dissipating energy rather than rigidly resisting it until failure occurs. Modern engineers recognize this as sophisticated seismic design, whether intentionally planned or arrived at through trial and error. The Spanish dismantled much of Sacsayhuaman following their conquest. The massive stones were too large to move, but Spanish colonists removed thousands of smaller stones from upper walls to build churches, homes, and other colonial structures in Cusco. What remains today represents perhaps 40% of the original complex. The lower courses with the larger stones survived because relocating them was physically impossible, even for Spanish engineers who had metal tools and draft animals the Incas supposedly lacked. The construction technique raises questions about Inca capabilities versus reported technology. Bronze was the hardest metal available to Inca metallurgists. Bronze tools can cut limestone and certain softer stones, but struggle with harder materials like andesite and diorite, used at Sacsayhuaman. Some researchers propose that Inca workers use harder stone hammers to shape blocks through patient percussion, gradually pecking away material in controlled fashion. This process would require extraordinary time and labor, months or years per stone, making the overall construction timeline implausibly long. Alternative theories suggest techniques beyond conventional understanding. Some researchers propose the Incas possessed knowledge of stone softening, possibly through plant extracts or other methods now lost, that temporarily made hard stone workable like clay. This theory lacks supporting evidence and seems chemically implausible, yet the precision of the stonework leaves proponents searching for explanations beyond simple percussion shaping. Other theories invoke previous civilizations with more advanced capabilities, suggesting the Incas inherited and renovated structures built by earlier cultures. Inca oral traditions do speak of earlier peoples and ancient ruins they encountered, though distinguishing historical fact from mythological tradition proves difficult. Jean-Pierre Protzen, an architectural historian who has studied Inca construction techniques extensively, conducted experiments shaping andesite using stone hammers and other methods available to Inca builders. He demonstrated that careful work could achieve smooth surfaces and relatively precise angles. However, his experimental work involved much smaller stones under controlled conditions. Scaling these techniques to 200-ton blocks while maintaining millimeter precision joints remains problematic. Protzen's work shows such construction was theoretically possible, but doesn't fully explain how it was actually accomplished at the observed scale and precision. The site's ceremonial function shouldn't be overlooked in favor of purely military or technical considerations. Sacsayhuaman hosted the annual Inti Raymi festival, celebrating the winter solstice and honoring Inti, the sun god. Thousands of people from across the empire gathered for these celebrations. The zigzag walls created natural amphitheater-like spaces where ceremonies could be viewed by large crowds. The fortress dimension, while real, may have been secondary to religious and symbolic functions demonstrating imperial power and divine connection. Archaeological excavations at Sacsayhuaman have uncovered evidence of different construction phases and uses over time. The earliest structures may predate the Inca Empire, built by earlier regional cultures. The Incas then expanded and modified these foundations, incorporating them into their grander architectural vision. This layering of construction complicates dating and attribution. What looks like unified Inca work may actually represent centuries of accumulated building by multiple cultures. The destruction of so much of the original complex represents an incalculable loss. Spanish chroniclers describe towers that no longer exist, underground passages now blocked or destroyed, and architectural features whose precise forms we can only guess at from written accounts. The Templo del Sol, a circular tower visible in early Spanish drawings, was completely dismantled for building materials. We're examining picked-over remains of what was once a far more extensive and impressive site. Modern tourism brings both benefits and challenges. Sacsayhuaman attracts thousands of visitors who provide economic support for Peru and validation of cultural heritage. Those same visitors inadvertently accelerate deterioration through foot traffic on ancient stones, touching surfaces that were never meant to be handled repeatedly, and introducing moisture and biological materials that promote erosion. Balancing preservation with access remains an ongoing challenge for site managers. Sacsayhuaman embodies a pattern seen throughout this exploration. Ancient builders accomplishing what modern technology struggles to replicate. The more closely engineers examine these walls, the less sense they make given available tools and methods. Bronze Age implements cutting andesite, primitive transport methods, moving 200-ton stones, achieving millimeter precision in polygonal fitting. Each element seems barely plausible individually. Combined, they require either accepting that our understanding of Inca capabilities is fundamentally incomplete, or acknowledging that conventional historical narratives miss something crucial about human technological development. The conventional explanations demand more faith than alternative theories. We're asked to believe that patient labor with stone hammers shaped 200-ton andesite blocks to millimeter precision, that thousands of workers using ropes and logs transported these masses across 20 kilometers of Andean mountains, that architects planned complex polygonal patterns, allowing each uniquely shaped stone to fit perfectly without modern surveying equipment. That all this occurred within a few decades using Bronze Age technology in the 15th century. Perhaps it happened exactly as conventional archaeology describes, but standing before these walls, examining joints where paper won't fit, considering the scale and precision, doubt seems reasonable. The walls remain silent about their construction, eloquent in their presence. They've withstood 5 centuries of earthquakes, weathering, and human interference. They'll likely stand for centuries more, long after our current explanations, whether conventional or alternative, have been revised or replaced by better understanding. The stones don't care what we believe about their origins. They simply endure, fitted together so precisely that even their seams become invisible, challenging each generation to explain how impossibility became reality. The precision stonework of Sacsayhuaman finds unexpected echo on another continent, where thousands of standing stones march across the French countryside in patterns suggesting astronomical knowledge that predates our understanding of when such knowledge should exist. For 4 kilometers across the Brittany countryside, more than 3,000 standing stones march in perfectly straight lines. The largest weighs 350 tons. They were erected 5,300 years ago, predating Stonehenge, predating the Egyptian pyramids, predating written language in most of Europe. Local Bretons called them soldiers turned to stone by magic. Archaeoastronomers see sophisticated astronomical calendar. Archaeologists document burial site and ceremonial center. No one definitively knows what they are. The Karnak stones aren't a single site, but a complex of megalithic monuments spread across the Morbihan region of southern Brittany. 3 major groupings form the core. Le Mennec contains 11 rows with 1,050 stones extending 1,167 meters. Camario features 10 rows with 1,029 stones across 1,120 meters. Kaleskan holds 13 rows with 555 stones spanning 880 meters. Additional isolated menhirs, single standing stones, dot the landscape, including the massive Le Grand Menhir Brisé, the Great Broken Menhir, which originally stood over 20 meters tall before breaking into 4 pieces, possibly during transport or erection. The stones themselves vary dramatically in size and composition. Most stand between 1 and 4 meters high, weathered granite monuments that have endured over 5 millennia of Breton weather. The alignments, parallel rows of stones, demonstrate remarkable consistency. Despite natural ground irregularities and millennia of agricultural activity around them, the rows maintain their orientation with precision, suggesting deliberate astronomical or geometric principles guided their placement. The dating relies primarily on archaeological context rather than the stones themselves. Excavations have uncovered Neolithic pottery, stone tools, and burial goods at various locations within and adjacent to the alignments. Carbon dating of organic materials places major construction phases around 3300 BCE, though some stones may be older and others represent later additions. The construction spanned centuries, possibly millennia, with different groups adding to existing patterns or creating new configurations. Local legends provide colorful but historically uncertain explanations. One tale claims the stones are Roman legionnaires turned to stone by St. Cornelius as they pursued him to the sea. Another describes them as soldiers from a forgotten army frozen mid-March by divine punishment. These stories, while culturally significant, offer little insight into the actual Neolithic purposes. They do, however, demonstrate that the stone's origins were already mysterious to medieval populations, their true builders and purposes long forgotten. The astronomical alignment theory gained traction through work by Scottish engineer Alexander Thom in the 1960s and 1970s. Thom surveyed megalithic sites across Britain and France, documenting precise measurements and orientations. At Karnak, he identified alignments corresponding to significant astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, lunar standstills. His measurements suggested the stones functioned as an elaborate calendar, tracking celestial cycles, crucial for agricultural societies, determining optimal planting and harvesting times. Thom's theories remain controversial. Critics argue he imposed patterns onto irregular data, finding astronomical significance where random variation better explains observed alignments. Proponents counter that the sheer number of apparent correlations exceeds chance probability. The debate centers on acceptable statistical methods and whether prehistoric societies possessed the astronomical knowledge Thom's theories require. The question isn't whether Neolithic peoples observed celestial patterns, clearly they did, but whether they incorporated that knowledge into megalithic construction at the sophisticated level Thom proposed. The mortuary function seems less debatable. Excavations have uncovered burial mounds, tumulus in archaeological terminology, associated with the alignments. These tombs contain human remains, grave goods including pottery and stone tools, and evidence of cremation practices. The largest tumulus, Saint-Michel, rises 12 meters high and contains elaborate internal chambers. The association between graves and standing stones suggests memorial or ancestor veneration purposes, with the alignments possibly representing symbolic pathways for the deceased or processional routes for funerary ceremonies. Some researchers propose the alignments served as territorial markers, defining boundaries between tribal groups or sacred spaces, separating profane from religious ground. The labor required to erect thousands of stones would have reinforced social bonds through collective effort while demonstrating a community's power and cohesion to neighbors. The monuments would serve both practical boundary functions and symbolic assertions of group identity and territorial control. An intriguing but speculative theory suggests seismic activity detection. The Brittany region experiences earthquakes and granite's piezoelectric properties, generating electrical charge under mechanical stress, could theoretically make stone alignments sensitive to ground movements preceding major tremors. This theory proposes Neolithic peoples discovered empirically that animals behaved strangely near the stones before earthquakes, leading them to create monitoring sites without understanding the physics involved. The theory lacks strong supporting evidence and seems to credit prehistoric societies with accidentally discovering phenomena that modern science only characterized in the 20th century. The stone's current arrangement doesn't necessarily reflect their original configuration. Centuries of agricultural activity, road construction, quarrying for building materials, and general neglect have displaced, destroyed, or removed many stones. Medieval and later populations felt no particular reverence for prehistoric monuments, freely incorporating ancient stones into walls, buildings, and roads. The alignments we see today are partially reconstructed based on archaeological evidence of stone holes and displaced fragments. Systematic archaeological interest began relatively late. Jean-Baptiste Colbert de Tossy mentioned the stones in a 1703 report, but serious study didn't commence until the 19th century. Scottish antiquarian James Milne conducted early excavations in the 1860s and 1870s, establishing the first systematic documentation. His work laid foundations for understanding Karnak's Neolithic context, though his methods were crude by modern standards. 20th century research brought more rigorous techniques, including aerial photography, revealing patterns invisible from ground level. The sheer scale of Karnak's megalithic complex indicates sustained cultural investment over extended periods. Erecting 3,000 plus stones across several kilometers required coordinated labor from large populations or sustained effort from smaller groups across generations. Either scenario implies these monuments held profound significance: religious, astronomical, territorial, or some combination we haven't fully grasped. Societies don't invest such resources in trivial projects. Comparison with Stonehenge highlights interesting contrasts. Both are Neolithic stone monuments with possible astronomical alignments. Stonehenge features circular configuration with massive trilithons creating an enclosed ritual space. Karnak's alignments are linear, open-ended, extending across landscape rather than defining bounded area. Stonehenge stones are larger but fewer. Karnak stones are smaller but vastly more numerous. The differences suggest divergent cultural priorities or different functional requirements. The Grand Menhir Brisé deserves particular attention. This enormous stone, originally perhaps 20.5 meters tall and weighing approximately 350 tons, represents one of the largest single stones ever erected by prehistoric peoples. It now lies broken in 4 pieces, though whether it broke during attempted erection, fell shortly after being raised, or collapsed centuries later remains uncertain. If it stood even briefly, it would have dominated the landscape for kilometers, serving as landmark, territorial marker, or astronomical sighting point visible from great distances. Modern preservation efforts face multiple challenges. The stones are publicly accessible, scattered across private and public lands. Preventing vandalism inadvertent damage from climbing and erosion from countless touching hands proves difficult. Some areas have been fenced to protect alignments while maintaining public access to portions of the site. Balancing tourism, a significant economic factor for the region, with preservation remains an ongoing negotiation. The question of purpose may be fundamentally flawed. We assume single purpose or primary function with secondary uses. Perhaps Karnak served multiple purposes simultaneously: burial site, an astronomical observatory, and territorial marker and ceremonial pathway and social gathering point. Different stones or different groupings might have served different functions within an integrated sacred landscape. Our categories, religious versus practical, astronomical versus mortuary, may not reflect how Neolithic peoples conceptualized their world. The Karnak stones march across Brittany like an army frozen mid-step, their purpose encrypted in their arrangement. Astronomical computer, religious procession route, elaborate cemetery, territorial boundary? Perhaps we're asking wrong questions. Perhaps their purpose was so fundamentally different from anything our culture creates that we lack the conceptual framework to recognize it. The stones stand silent, aligned with precision toward purposes that may forever remain beyond recovery, teaching us that some human endeavors become completely opaque across sufficient temporal distance. We can measure, excavate, theorize, but the minds that plan these alignments are gone, taking their intentions and understanding with them. From stones arranged in lines to stones arranged in circles, the megalithic mysteries continue just across the English Channel, where an even more massive complex encompasses an entire village. While tourists flock to Stonehenge, the world's largest prehistoric stone circle sits relatively ignored just 20 miles north in Wiltshire. Avebury is so vast that an entire village fits comfortably inside it. The original complex contained nearly 600 standing stones, arranged in outer and inner circles, covering an area 15 times larger than Stonehenge. If size indicates importance, Avebury may have been Neolithic Britain's most significant ceremonial centre, yet it receives a fraction of Stonehenge's attention and recognition. The outer circle measures approximately 330 meters in diameter, enclosing an area of roughly 28 acres. Originally, about 100 massive sarsen stones formed this outer ring, each weighing 20 to 40 tons. Within the outer circle stood two smaller stone circles, one to the north and one to the south, each containing approximately 30 stones. A ceremonial avenue lined with paired stones extended from the southern entrance, connecting Avebury to other monuments in the sacred landscape. The scale dwarfs Stonehenge in every dimension except individual stone size. Construction began around 2250 BCE, according to radiocarbon dating of organic materials from excavated features, making Avebury older than Stonehenge's major building phases. The project required moving stones from the Marlborough Downs approximately 2 kilometers south of the site. Unlike Stonehenge's carefully shaped stones, Avebury's builders used natural sarsen boulders with minimal modification. The sarsen stones, massive blocks of sandstone cemented by silica, occur naturally throughout the region as remnants of a tertiary period sandstone layer that eroded, leaving scattered boulders. The earthwork surrounding the stone circles adds another dimension to Avebury's monumentality. A massive ditch was dug around the outer stone circle, with the excavated chalk used to create an inner bank. This represents the reverse of typical defensive earthworks, where banks sit outside ditches. The inversion suggests ceremonial, rather than military, purpose. The bank faces inward, creating an enclosed sacred space, rather than external fortification. The ditch originally measured approximately 9 meters deep and 21 meters wide, requiring the removal of an estimated 200,000 tons of chalk using antler picks and other primitive tools. Avebury forms the centerpiece of a broader ceremonial landscape. To the south lies Silbury Hill, the largest prehistoric man-made mound in Europe, rising 40 meters high and containing approximately 248,000 cubic meters of earth and chalk. Its purpose remains mysterious. Excavations have found no burial or obvious function. To the southeast, West Kennet Longbarrow served as communal tomb for Neolithic peoples, containing chambers where skeletal remains and grave goods were deposited over centuries. The sanctuary, a timber and stone circle connected to Avebury by the West Kennet Avenue, completed the monumental complex. These features integrated into a sacred landscape where different monuments served complementary ceremonial functions. The destruction of Avebury began in the medieval period and accelerated during the 17th and 18th centuries. The motivations were partly practical. Large stones provided excellent building material when broken into manageable pieces, but religious fervor also played a role. The church viewed pagan monuments with suspicion, and some stone destruction represented deliberate effort to eliminate sites associated with pre-Christian practices. The process involved digging pits beside targeted stones, undermining them until they toppled, then building fires against them and dousing with water to crack the stone into transportable fragments. Archaeological excavations have uncovered evidence of this destruction. Beneath several fallen stones, researchers found the crushed remains of medieval individuals, presumably workers killed when stones toppled unexpectedly during demolition attempts. One skeleton, discovered by archaeologist Alexander Keiler in the 1930s, was accompanied by coins and implements dating to the 14th century. The man had apparently been caught beneath a stone during toppling operations, his body left buried under tons of sarsen, a grim testament to destruction's dangers. The systematic documentation of Avebury began with antiquarian John Aubrey's 1649 visit. Aubrey, a scholar and early archaeologist, recognized Avebury's importance and produced the first detailed plan of the monument. His drawings show substantially more stone standing than exist today, indicating accelerated destruction in subsequent decades. Aubrey's work brought Avebury to scholarly attention, though insufficient to prevent ongoing stone removal for agricultural and construction purposes. William Stukely, an 18th century antiquarian, conducted more extensive documentation between 1719 and 1724. His detailed plans, drawings, and written descriptions provide invaluable record of Avebury's condition before further deterioration. Stukely documented stones that have since disappeared, recorded features now lost, and preserved information about the monument's original extent that modern archaeology couldn't recover through excavation alone. He watched with horror as villagers continued destroying stones, writing passionate appeals for preservation that went largely unheeded. By the early 20th century, much of Avebury lay in ruins. Stones had been removed, buried, or broken up. Houses occupied the circle's interior, roads cut through the earthwork. The monument had become a fragmented landscape feature rather than coherent, archaeological site. Alexander Keiler, a wealthy businessman and amateur archaeologist, began systematic restoration in the 1930s. He purchased land within the monument, excavated buried stones, re-erected fallen ones, and marked positions where stones had been destroyed. His work restored some semblance of Avebury's original form, though complete reconstruction was impossible given centuries of destruction. Keeler's excavations revealed construction details invisible in surface observation. Stones had been erected in pits dug into the chalk bedrock, with antler picks left in pit fill, presumably offerings or simply abandoned tools. The excavated material around stones contained Neolithic pottery, worked flint, and animal bones, suggesting feasting associated with construction. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials provided chronological framework still used today. Keeler's methodology was reasonably rigorous for his era, and his documentation preserved information about excavated features. Modern inhabitants of Avebury village live literally within the monument. Houses sit inside the stone circle. The main road passes through the earthwork. The pub serves drinks meters from standing stones. This integration of ancient monuments and modern village creates unique situation, daily life occurring within space that was sacred 5,000 years ago. The juxtaposition feels simultaneously mundane and profound. School children walk past megaliths on their way to class. Residents mow lawns between stones that witnessed Neolithic ceremonies. The relationship between Avebury and Stonehenge invites comparison and speculation about their relative significance to Neolithic peoples. Stonehenge's stones are larger and more carefully shaped, transported from greater distances, arranged with more obvious astronomical precision. These factors suggest Stonehenge held special importance or served different ceremonial functions. Yet Avebury's vastly greater size, its integration into broader monumental landscape, and its apparent use over extended periods suggest it functioned as major ceremonial center, serving larger populations or different purposes than Stonehenge. UNESCO designated Avebury part of the Stonehenge and Avebury World Heritage Site in 1986, recognizing both monuments' exceptional universal value. The designation brings international attention and resources for preservation and research. It also acknowledges that understanding Neolithic Britain requires considering monuments not in isolation, but as integrated sacred landscapes where multiple sites serve complementary functions within coherent ceremonial systems. Approximately half of Avebury's original stones survive in some form, either standing, fallen but present, or represented by modern markers where Keeler's excavations confirmed their original positions. The other half are simply gone, broken up for building materials, buried under houses and roads, or removed without trace. What remains is fragmentary glimpse of what once existed. The most expertly placed stones, the most symbolically significant positions, the features that would have made Avebury's purpose clear. Those might be among the lost stones, destroyed by people who saw only obstacles to farming or convenient building materials. Avebury's obscurity relative to Stonehenge teaches us that fame doesn't equal significance. For centuries, this massive complex was actively destroyed, while Stonehenge, though damaged, retained enough integrity to inspire wonder. We'll never know what Avebury looked like at its peak. The stones we've lost might have been the very ones that would have explained its purpose, revealed its astronomical alignments, or confirmed theories about Neolithic cosmology. History's preservation is selective and often arbitrary. What survives isn't necessarily what was most important, just what escaped destruction through luck, remoteness, or protective superstition. The destruction of Avbury demonstrates how easily ancient knowledge vanishes when monuments lose protective cultural significance. Once people stopped viewing the stones as sacred, nothing prevented their pragmatic reuse. The same pattern repeats worldwide. Pyramids quarried for building stone, temples demolished for religious zealotry, ancient sites destroyed through simple indifference. Our next destination shows what happens when ancient structures survive intact, but their purpose remains completely baffling despite preservation. Inside a Mayan pyramid at Palenque, Mexico, archaeologist Alberto Ruz Lhuillier made a discovery in 1948 that would change Mesoamerican archaeology forever. He noticed something unusual in the Temple of the Inscriptions, a large stone slab in the floor with finger holes drilled into it, suggesting it could be moved. After 4 years of painstaking excavation, removing rubble from a hidden staircase that descended into the pyramid's heart, his team reached a sealed chamber containing an intact royal tomb. This was the first such burial ever found inside a Mesoamerican pyramid, challenging assumptions that New World pyramids served only as temple platforms, never as tombs like their Egyptian counterparts. The tomb belonged to Kinich Janab Pakal, known as Pakal the Great, who ruled Palenque from 615 to 683 CE. He ascended to power at age 12 and reigned for 68 years, overseeing Palenque's transformation into one of the Maya civilization's most important cities. The pyramid itself, rising 27 meters high with 9 terraced levels, was constructed specifically as Pakal's funerary monument, built during the final years of his reign and completed shortly after his death. The burial chamber measures approximately 9 meters long and 4 meters wide, with a vaulted ceiling reaching 7 meters at its apex. The walls bear stucco reliefs depicting 9 figures, the lords of the night in Maya cosmology, guardians of the underworld realm Pakal was about to enter. But the chamber's most remarkable feature is the massive stone sarcophagus lid weighing approximately 5 tons, measuring 3.8 meters long and 2.2 meters wide, covered entirely with intricate carved imagery. The sarcophagus lid depicts Pakal at the moment of death, descending into the jaws of the underworld. In Maya cosmology, death represented transformation rather than ending. The deceased journeyed through Xibalba, the underworld, before potential rebirth or transformation into divine ancestors. The carving shows Pakal falling backward into the skeletal jaws of the earth, positioned on the world tree that connects the 3 cosmic levels: the heavens above, the earth's surface, and the underworld below. The tree rises from the earth monster's head, its branches supporting the celestial bird, a representation of the heavens. The imagery integrates multiple layers of Maya religious symbolism into coherent cosmological statement. Maya scholars interpret the lid's iconography within well-documented religious frameworks. The central figure is clearly in a reclining position associated with death and descent. The world tree motif appears throughout Maya art, representing the axis mundi, connecting cosmic realms. The quincunx symbol, a pattern of 5 dots arranged with 4 at corners and 1 at center, represents the 4 cardinal directions and the center, a fundamental organizing principle in Maya thought. The glyphs surrounding the imagery provide dates, astronomical references, and genealogical information linking Pakal to divine ancestors. The alternative interpretation emerged in 1968 when Swiss author Erich von Däniken published Chariots of the Gods, proposing that ancient monuments worldwide resulted from extraterrestrial contact. Von Däniken argued that Pakal's sarcophagus lid depicted not a Maya king descending to the underworld, but an ancient astronaut piloting a spacecraft. In his interpretation, the reclining figure sits at control panels. The world tree represents a rocket exhaust. The surrounding imagery depicts technological apparatus, and the whole composition shows a man in a space capsule. Von Däniken's theory gained popular following despite complete rejection by archaeological and Maya studies communities. The imagery's interpretation requires ignoring everything known about Maya art, religion, and symbolism. The supposed control panels are standard Maya glyphs and symbolic elements appearing throughout their art. The rocket exhaust is the world tree, a motif appearing in countless Maya artworks with clear religious meanings. The figure's position matches Maya depictions of death and transformation, not modern astronaut postures. The ancient astronaut interpretation exemplifies a pattern in pseudo-archaeology, taking artifacts from their cultural context, applying modern technological analogies, and concluding ancient peoples couldn't have created these works without external, often extraterrestrial, assistance. This approach is both culturally insulting and intellectually dishonest. It denies agency and achievement to ancient civilizations, suggesting they needed outside help to accomplish their cultural and architectural developments. Maya civilization possessed sophisticated astronomical knowledge, developed complex writing systems, created architectural achievements, and built elaborate cities, all documented through archaeology, epigraphy, and ethnohistory. Their astronomical observations tracked Venus cycles, predicted eclipses, and maintained calendars of extraordinary precision. Their mathematical system included 0 centuries before Europe adopted the concept from Arabia. Their architectural achievements included massive pyramids, palaces, and urban planning demonstrating advanced engineering. These accomplishments are well documented and explainable through cultural evolution, accumulated knowledge, and human ingenuity. The sarcophagus lid itself demonstrates Maya artistic and technical achievements. Carving such detailed imagery into limestone required specialized tools, skilled artisans, and years of labor. The iconographic program reflects deep religious and cosmological knowledge. The engineering required to transport and position the 5-ton lid within the burial chamber shows sophisticated understanding of mechanics and planning. These achievements don't require extraterrestrial explanation. They require recognizing Maya capabilities. The tomb contained additional treasures beyond the sarcophagus. Jade jewelry adorned Pakal's body, jade being more valuable than gold in Maya culture, associated with life force and resurrection. A jade mosaic death mask covered his face, reconstructing his features in precious stone. Shell and jade ornaments, pottery vessels, and other grave goods accompanied him for the afterlife journey. 2 young individuals were buried near the chamber entrance, possibly sacrificial victims or retainers meant to serve Pakal in the underworld. The hieroglyphic inscriptions throughout the temple provide extensive information about Pakal and his dynasty. The Temple of the Inscriptions takes its name from 3 large panels containing 617 hieroglyphs. one of the longest known Maya inscriptions. These texts record dynastic history, astronomical events, ritual performances, and historical legitimations linking Pakal to divine ancestors and establishing his descendants' right to rule. The ability to read these glyphs, developed through decades of scholarly work, provides direct access to Maya thoughts and beliefs in their own words. The discovery of Pakal's tomb revolutionized understanding of Maya pyramids and burial practices. Before 1952, Mesoamerican pyramids were thought to function solely as temple platforms, distinct from Egyptian pyramids, which housed burials. Pakal's tomb demonstrated that some Maya pyramids served dual purposes: religious structures and royal mausoleums. This finding prompted re-examination of other Mesoamerican pyramids, leading to discoveries of additional burials at Palenque and other sites. Modern tourism brings millions to Palenque, many specifically to see the Temple of the Inscriptions and learn about Pakal's tomb. The Mexican government closed the burial chamber to public access in the 1990s to prevent damage from humidity, heat, and carbon dioxide from visitors' breath. A full-scale replica now allows tourists to experience the tomb's appearance without damaging the original. The actual sarcophagus remains in situ, protected but no longer directly accessible. The ancient astronaut interpretation persists in popular culture despite thorough debunking by Maya scholars. Television programs, internet sites, and books continue promoting von Däniken's ideas, reaching audiences far larger than academic publications. The theory's appeal lies partly in its simplicity. It offers easy answers to complex questions about ancient achievements. It also taps into modern technological hubris, making ancient accomplishments relatable by recasting them as modern technology rather than understanding them in their actual cultural context. The real tragedy isn't the debate itself. Academic disagreement advances knowledge. The tragedy is that arguing about imaginary spacecraft distracts from appreciating genuine Maya achievements. While debating whether Pakal sits in a rocket, we miss the sophisticated astronomy that Maya priests used to predict celestial events. While arguing about alien contact, we overlook the complex writing system that encoded their language, history, and beliefs. While imposing modern technological interpretations, we fail to understand the rich cosmology that gave meaning to Maya lives. The sarcophagus lid is a Rorschach test. We see what we're primed to see. To Maya scholars versed in iconography, religious symbolism, and cultural context, it's a rich text depicting cosmological beliefs and royal death rituals. To alternative theorists seeking evidence of ancient astronauts, it's a spaceship control panel. The limestone itself doesn't change. Our interpretations reveal more about us, our assumptions, our cultural context, our willingness to engage seriously with cultures distant from our own, than about the ancient Maya who carved these images in stone. Pakal's tomb endures, sealed again within the pyramid's heart, protected from the thousands who once descended Ruse's staircase to witness it. The lid remains, depicting whatever observers wish to see: a king's journey to the underworld, an astronaut's spacecraft, or simply beautiful stonework created by skilled hands expressing beliefs. We can understand if we bother to learn the cultural language in which they're written. The choice of interpretation says less about ancient Maya capabilities than about our willingness to recognize human achievement in forms different from our own technological frameworks. The contested interpretations at Pelonk remind us that ancient mysteries sometimes persist, not because evidence is lacking, but because we project modern assumptions onto ancient achievements, missing what's actually there while searching for what we expect or desire to find. In 1992, villagers in Longyu County, Zhejiang Province, decided to pump water from what they assumed were natural ponds dotting the landscape. As water levels dropped, something unexpected emerged. Stone steps, then walls, then pillars, then carvings. What locals had dismissed as ordinary water features were actually entrances to vast underground chambers. 24 massive hand-carved caves excavated from solid siltstone, covering approximately 30,000 square meters, descending as deep as 30 meters below the surface. Caves with no mention in historical records. Caves with no construction debris, accounting for the million cubic meters of removed rock. Caves with no explanation for their existence or purpose. The discovery wasn't gradual archaeological revelation, but sudden exposure. One day, ordinary ponds. The next, ancient architecture. 4 of the caves have been extensively explored and are now open to limited tourism. The others remain water-filled or only partially investigated. What's been documented already defies easy explanation. These aren't natural caverns enhanced by human activity. They're entirely artificial. Every surface carved by human hands using tools and techniques that remain uncertain. The caves vary in size, but share common architectural features. Cave 1, the largest explored chamber, spans approximately 2,000 square meters, with ceiling heights reaching 30 meters at the highest point. Massive stone pillars, left in place during excavation to support the ceiling, create a hall-like atmosphere. The walls and ceilings display uniform chisel marks arranged in parallel lines, suggesting systematic excavation following a consistent pattern. The marks are too regular to be random, too consistent to be improvised. They indicate planned methodology executed by skilled workers. The precision of the excavation is remarkable. Walls are vertical or follow specific angles. Ceilings arch smoothly overhead. The pillars taper slightly toward their tops, a design choice that's both aesthetic and structural, reducing load on the upper portions while maintaining support capacity. The floors are relatively level despite being carved from natural rock, whose strata don't lie horizontally. Achieving these geometric regularities while removing such massive volumes of stone requires sophisticated surveying and planning. The decorative elements add another layer of mystery. Some walls bear carved fish, birds, and horses. Images executed with skill suggesting trained artists rather than casual decoration. The carvings aren't elaborate or extensive, but their presence indicates the caves weren't purely functional excavations. Someone invested time and effort creating images that served no practical purpose in what might have been storage facilities, workshops, or shelters. Why decorate purely utilitarian spaces? The missing rock represents the most baffling aspect. Excavating these caves required removing approximately 1 million cubic meters of siltstone. That's roughly the volume of 400 Olympic swimming pools. The material had to go somewhere. Siltstone doesn't dissolve or disappear. It's solid rock that must be physically removed, transported, and deposited, yet no corresponding debris, piles, quarry waste, or construction fills have been identified in the region. Where did 1 million cubic meters of rock go? Several theories attempt to explain the missing material. Perhaps it was crushed and used for construction throughout the region, incorporated into buildings, roads, and other projects over centuries, dispersed so widely it's no longer recognizable as coming from a single source. Perhaps it was dumped in the nearby river, carried away by currents, and distributed across the landscape in layers too thin to identify. Perhaps it filled other caverns or natural depressions we haven't yet connected to these caves. None of these explanations are particularly satisfying. Each requires assumptions about ancient capabilities, motivations, and methods that remain unverified. The dating proves frustratingly imprecise. No organic materials suitable for radiocarbon dating have been found in contexts clearly associated with construction. The caves contain no pottery, no tools, no construction equipment abandoned by their builders. Stylistic analysis of the carvings suggests Han Dynasty aesthetic, 206 BCE, 220 CE. But this dating method is subjective and uncertain. The caves could be much older, with the carvings added later. Or they could be younger than Han Dynasty, but executed in archaic style. Without definitive dating evidence, assigning precise chronology becomes educated guessing. The complete absence of historical records seems impossible for a project of this magnitude. China maintained extensive written records throughout its imperial history. Major construction projects, particularly those involving thousands of workers over extended periods, typically appear in administrative documents, local histories, or at minimum, local legends and oral traditions. The Longyu Caves appear in none of these sources. It's as if the entire project was systematically erased from collective memory. This absence raises uncomfortable questions. Were the caves deliberately kept secret during their use, known only to a select few who left no written record? Were they constructed by a population that didn't produce written records, or whose records haven't survived? Or were they recorded, but those records were destroyed or lost before modern historians could access them? Each possibility has implications for understanding Chinese history and the societies that created these structures. The purpose remains purely speculative. Storage facilities for grain or other materials. The chambers would provide stable temperature and humidity, ideal for preservation. Military bunkers or strategic reserves. The concealment beneath water surfaces would hide them from enemies, religious or ceremonial spaces. The decorative carvings and impressive scale suggest purposes beyond mere utility. Imperial projects demonstrating power and capability. The technical achievement would certainly broadcast authority and resources. None of these theories explains all the features or the peculiar absence of any historical mention. The water infiltration raises additional questions about original design. The caves currently below the water table must be actively pumped to remain accessible. Were they always prone to flooding, designed with that limitation in mind? Or has the regional water table risen over centuries, submerging spaces that were originally dry? If the former, why excavate chambers you knew would flood? If the latter, the flooding might explain why the caves passed out of use and memory. They became inaccessible, their entrances hidden beneath expanding ponds. Comparison with other ancient excavations provides limited parallels. The scale approaches that of Egyptian rock-cut tombs, but those are clearly funerary, with extensive decoration and obvious purpose. Chinese underground tomb complexes exist, but those contain burials, grave goods, and historical documentation. Cappadocia's underground cities in Turkey show somewhat similar scale, but those have clear defensive purposes and historical context. The Longyu caves lack the diagnostic features that would place them in established categories. The engineering required shouldn't be underestimated. Excavating vertically downward while maintaining structural integrity requires understanding stress distribution and rock mechanics. Removing material without causing cave-ins demands careful sequencing. Removing too much too quickly risks collapse. Providing ventilation and light to workers operating 30 meters underground presents logistical challenges. Managing the excavated material, hauling it to the surface through narrow passages or up steep ramps, requires significant labor coordination. None of this is impossible with ancient technology, but all of it requires planning, expertise, and sustained effort. The pillars left in place demonstrate sophisticated structural understanding. Their positions aren't random but carefully calculated to support ceiling loads. The dimensions provide adequate strength without unnecessarily leaving excess rock unexcavated. Some pillars align with each other across chambers, suggesting the excavators maintained accurate surveying of their underground positions relative to surface features or other chambers. This level of coordination indicates engineering knowledge beyond simple trial and error. Modern investigation faces constraints. The caves are tourist attractions, generating revenue for the local economy. This limits destructive sampling or extensive excavation that might answer questions but would damage visitor experience. The water-filled caves require expensive pumping to explore, and maintaining dry conditions for extended research periods presents ongoing costs. The Chinese government has been selective about allowing foreign researchers access, preferring to keep investigation primarily under Chinese archaeological control. The caves have sparked local pride and tourism development. Longyu County markets itself around this mysterious heritage, constructing visitor centers, hotels, and infrastructure to accommodate tourists drawn by the enigma. This economic dimension complicates pure archaeological investigation. There's financial incentive to maintain mystery rather than definitively solving it. A conclusively explained site might lose some allure. An unsolved mystery keeps people coming back. The Longyu Caves present a mystery of absence rather than presence. The physical reality is undeniable. Massive chambers definitely exist, carved by human hands from solid rock. What's missing is the context. No records explaining who built them. No debris revealing construction methods. No artifacts indicating purpose. No legends preserving memory of their creation. It's as if someone systematically erased all evidence of the project except the excavations themselves. This erasure might be the most significant aspect. Forgetting happens naturally over centuries. Oral traditions fade, records are lost, purposes become obscure. But complete forgetting of something this substantial, this labor-intensive, this present in the physical landscape that seems almost willful. Did some authority deliberately suppress knowledge of these caves? Did catastrophe or social collapse break transmission of information between generations? Or are we simply missing sources that would explain everything if we could access them? The caves endure, their walls bearing silent witness to vanished labor. 1,000,000 cubic meters of rock removed by hands unknown for purposes uncertain during a period undetermined, using techniques unrecorded. They represent an archaeological negative space defined more by what's missing than what's present. And perhaps that's the lesson. Our historical record is fragmentary, incomplete, shaped by accidents of preservation and documentation. The Longyu caves remind us that entire massive projects can slip through the historical record's gaps, leaving physical evidence but no explanatory context. If something this enormous can be forgotten, what else has vanished from history, taking its stories with it? Our journey through these ancient mysteries, from Göbekli Tepe's intentional burial to Longyu's complete historical erasure, reveals a pattern. Humanity's past contains far more complexity than conventional narratives acknowledge. Megalithic construction appears earlier than it should. Precision stonework exceeds expected capabilities. Underground cities and massive excavations demonstrate engineering beyond credited technologies. Global distribution of similar monuments suggests either parallel development or knowledge transmission we haven't recognized. In every case, the structures themselves are undeniable. Only our explanations remain uncertain, provisional, subject to revision as new evidence emerges or new perspectives allow us to see what was always present but unrecognized. The stones, the carvings, the massive chambers all wait patiently for understanding, indifferent to our theories, silent about their secrets, enduring through centuries while we struggle to comprehend the capabilities and motivations of those who came before.